information and the rest of that skill out of him.
You know, one other position that I think is going to be particularly interesting tonight is running back. We saw the Dallas Cowboys take Ezekiel Elliott, number 4 overall last year, and that was a franchise-changing decision. And we've got a talented group of running backs this year, and I think we could see up to 4 go in the first round, perhaps 2 in the top 10. So did Dallas change the game after many years of not seeing first-round running backs? I think so. And I think that's going to be a storyline to follow. And then we have 2 running backs that are uber talented, right? We've got Dalvin Cook out of Florida State. We've got Joe Mixon out of Oklahoma. Both guys that are first-round talents all day long with major, major question marks off the field. How does the NFL value those guys? Do those bona fide first-round talents slip out of the first round? That's something I'll be watching.
Now, for the running backs, you said that it's a lot of intrigue. Who do you think in the top 10 is a team that could jump for a running back? Maybe a Leonard Fournette in the top 10.
Yeah, so for me, Jacksonville. Jacksonville's one of the spots that I've been pegging running backs for the last several weeks. I really took a look into that team, its running back production over the last 10 years. And really since Maurice Jones-Drew in 2009, they've had really poor production from that position. They've not had a 1,000-yard running back since 2009, Maurice Jones-Drew. I mean, that's crazy. A 1,000-yard running back is not that difficult of a thing to produce.
62 yards a game.
62 yards a game. They've made investments in Chris Ivory. They've made investments in T.J. Yeldon, but it's not producing the on-field results. Now, you look at this offense and Blake Bortles, and he needs help. He needs a running back and a running game to rely on. Leonard Fournette can be that guy. They've got Tom Coughlin calling the shots. They've got Doug Marrone as their head coach. You know they're going to want to pound the football. So as high as number 4, again, I think running back is in play, and I think Leonard Fournette could be that player.
And just to interject and piggyback off of that thought, I think Fournette would be a game changer for Jacksonville because it forces your hand, if you have an investment in an early running back, to honor the running game. How many games last year did Jacksonville get away from running the football in games that they were competitive in and just decided they wanted to throw the ball 40 times a game? And it's not that one-dimensional style of play is not a winning formula at this level. Now, with Doug Marrone coming in there as the head coach, this is going to be more than a one-year transition for them in order to get to a point where Fournette can reach his potential because he's not a scheme universal prospect.
Yeah.
As much as he's been touted as a generational talent, this is somebody that needs to have firm gaps between the tackles that he can hit and hit at full speed to get out onto the second level. John, to finish your other question, I think there's 2 other teams that have potential in the top 10. I think Carolina at 8 and the New York Jets at 6. I think they're a real wild card as far as the top 10. They could go a lot of different ways, and that could really pivot how we see the first half of the first round play out.
Now, do we think that Leonard Fournette is the only running back that could go top 10? Do you see any possibility? Maybe Christian McCaffrey jumps to the top 10? Dalvin Cook maybe even jump in the top 10? Or is it just Leonard Fournette or bust top 10?
I think it's Fournette and McCaffrey. I have a very hard time seeing McCaffrey fall outside the top 15. I think his absolute bottom floor is Philadelphia Eagles at 14. So if the Carolina Panthers, he would be a very nice complement to what they have there in Jonathan Stewart and Cam Newton. They have a lot of power in the running game between the tackles, whether that's quarterback run with the running back lead or if that's the single back formations. So getting McCaffrey as somebody that can work the outside or work zone stretch plays a little bit more effectively would give them some nice balance to their running game that I don't feel like they have right now.
Yeah, and when you look at Carolina, Cam Newton's not going to be able to throw a football until July. Never has it been more important for them to have a running game that they can rely on. Christian McCaffrey gives them a back that can do boundary runs, run between the tackles, and gives them a bona fide receiving threat out of the backfield. That's going to be big for Cam Newton to be able to establish some timing there, get some easy completions, and have him create after the catch. That's an element to the offense that I think this year, given that Cam Newton's going to be very much behind the 8 ball, that they can use.
Now, we've talked a lot about teams' top 10 storylines. What about some teams towards the end of the round that you're looking to?
I'm curious when the offensive line run starts. Yep. This offensive line class is not filled with a lot of top-end talent. I think you've probably got 7 or 8 names if you're looking for starters and quality starters in this class. You've got 7 or 8 names. You've got the 3 premium offensive tackles, Ryan Ramczyk from Wisconsin, Cam Robinson from Alabama, and Garrett Bowles from Utah. You have Forrest Lamp is pretty much the consensus media. I know Joe and I, you feel very strongly about Forrest Lamp.
Yes.
He's in your top 15, I believe.
Yes.
Lamp's a little bit lower for me, but I certainly think he's a quality starter at the NFL level. Pat Elflein from Ohio State is another candidate. Dorian Johnson from Pittsburgh. And again, not all these guys are scheme-specific guys either. But if you're looking for quality starters, you can count them on two hands. What your options are as far as if you want a guy that you can plug in right now into your starting lineup and find success with. And I'm curious because there's teams starting at maybe Indianapolis, Baltimore, Tampa Bay, Denver. These teams all need offensive line help to some degree, whether it's interior or exterior. So when does that start, and does that influence the board the rest of the way down into the 20s?
Another thought for the end of the first round is a lot of the teams that are picking back there are linked to wanting to trade up. We've heard rumblings of the Chiefs curious to trade up. The Falcons are willing to trade up. So does those trades impact what happens at the back of the first round? I think so. And then you always have to keep in mind, at the end of the first round, you get that fifth-year option. It's a big factor in quarterbacks. And to my point earlier, there's not a lot of top-of-the-first-round caliber quarterbacks this year. So could we see them slip towards the back part of the first round, see some teams trade back into the first round, and be able to take advantage of having that fifth year with that quarterback?
How important is that fifth year for franchise building? Being able to have that extra year inside the franchise to be able to evaluate the kind of player you have. How important is that for a team that wants to invest in a Patrick Mahomes, a Davis Webb, a Deshaun Kaiser?
Well, I think the salary distribution and player allocation, as far as general fans is concerned, it's, oh, so-and-so is a free agent this year. We might need to sign somebody. But having that flexibility, getting that extra year of control, and understanding that the economic impact on your salary cap is going to be reduced versus if this player were to hit the market, if they go out and blow up in the first 3 years in the league and you only have a 4-year rookie contract with them, now you have to sign them to a big-time deal where at the growth of the salary cap, you're talking about double-digit $1 million annual per average. So getting that extra year and then being able to allocate your roster resources elsewhere and continue that constant juggle is something that's really underrated as far as cap management and roster construction in general.
Now, the Cleveland Browns are officially on the clock. But before we get into them, I want you guys to call your shot. What's one team in the top 10 that's going to trade out, and then one team at the end of the first round you think might trade out? Joe, what do you think?
Go first.
Yeah. So, man, there's a lot of options. I'll say Buffalo. This is a team that has a lot of needs, right? They could go cornerback, linebacker, tight end. They need a number 2 wide receiver, and they don't have all the picks. They don't have a 4th-round pick. This is a first-year coach in Sean McDermott. You know he's going to want to get his guys, and I think they are a real possibility. You said top 10. I went barely top 10. Yeah. Buffalo's at 10. So I think that's a strong possibility.
Oh, give Joe an inch, he'll take a mile.
Yeah, yeah. Get used to it, guys.
I'm going to go Tennessee Titans at 5.
Yep.
You know, there's been a number of times throughout the past 24 hours in which we've heard some dots connected. I remember one report that's already out there suggesting that Tennessee has a deal in place for the 5th pick to trade back out. It seems like they are adopting a Philadelphia 76ers approach of trust the process. They want to allocate draft capital. That seems to be what their mantra is right now. They're interested in maximizing the value of the picks. Maybe they feel there's only a handful of blue chip players. If you're picking at 5, you're still expecting to get a franchise cornerstone. Maybe they think their options are limited. So if the board falls the way they would like it to, maybe you see them stick there at 5. But if you're going to ask me a team in the top 10, which one's going to trade out, I'm going to bet on Tennessee.
I got to go one more. New York Jets, right? They're sitting there at number 6. They've got more needs than any team in the NFL. And what is one pick in the top 10 going to do to help that? Not much.
Cleveland? Trade up? Okay.
Right there, bam. Yeah. So let's say we see Myles Garrett go number 1 and Mitchell Trubisky is still on the clock. Nice trade down partner right there. Cleveland has the ammunition to move up. The Jets need picks on top of picks. Makes a lot of sense.
Now, who are some teams at the end of the round that you think may be looking to move back? Maybe a team is trying to jump up for a quarterback so they can get that 5th year option.
As far as early 2nd round moving up into the late 1st?
Yeah, what 2 teams do you think would be a good marriage for that type of trade?
Okay, I could see a team, say Arizona Cardinals, for example. You know, we've heard in talking to some folks, they have eyes on a couple of prospects that should be there at 13. So if they get their guy at 13, the understanding is they still have 36, 37-year-old Carson Palmer, who they need to find a replacement for, because if they do not, this transition can get very ugly. So if they have a quarterback that they're enamored by, perhaps Kansas City Chiefs, if somebody that's not there, last year they traded out of the first round altogether before drafting Chris Jones in the second round. Maybe the New Orleans Saints, who already had a first-round draft selection at 32, are willing to move and deal a little bit. A team like that dropping back, and a team like Arizona getting aggressive to go up, they take the player that they want at 13, and then they understand, we like this guy, he fits what we want to do, so let's go up and get him at the end of the first round, have that 5th year of control.
Who's playing quarterback for the Houston Texans? And that's
Tom
a team.
Savage.
Right. That's a team ready to compete. That's a team ready to win playoff games. They're a quarterback away. Go get your guy. If Houston believes in a quarterback, go move up. Go get Deshaun Watson. Go get Mitch Trubisky. I don't have a name for you, but they need a quarterback. They need production from that passing game. They were able to make the playoffs with Brock Osweiler as their starting quarterback last year.
Yeah.
They're a quarterback away. That's a team that should really think about moving up.
Well, you guys mentioned the Browns as a team that could be trading up for a quarterback. How ready is their roster for a quarterback? Are they ready in their roster construction to bring in a quarterback into their system right now?
Joe and I were talking about this off the air before as we were prepping for the show. I'll tackle the offensive line, Joe, and you can tackle the skill players that they have there. They have made a ton of investments in the offensive line this year. They signed a starting center and a starting guard on top of Joe Thomas, who's been a franchise left tackle for years. Joel Bitonio is a very underrated offensive guard. So they have made the investments necessary in the offensive line to be able to protect the quarterback.
Yeah, so they do have the infrastructure in place, right? They do. But you got to think, can they pass on Myles Garrett? Can they really do it? They're ready for a quarterback, but I'm not sure they can pass up on Garrett.
All right, guys. The time is here. The pick is in. With the first overall pick, the Cleveland Browns select Myles Garrett, defensive end, Texas A&M. This is the guy we thought for a whole year Garrett was the guy. Then the last 48 hours, we didn't know. Trubisky was kind of, we thought it was a 50-50 chance of which one. Kyle, are you surprised?
I'm glad cooler heads seem to have prevailed here. Given the opportunity, you have your total pick of the litter. You're going to look and exhaust every possible avenue, right? You're going to explore, well, maybe we can invest in a pass rusher at 12 and get our franchise quarterback at 1 and start playing those games. And I'm not sure how much of this was gamesmanship, how much of this was, genuine lack of conformity amongst the front office and the ownership and the coaching staff altogether, if they were really on the same page or not on the same page. But Garrett's, he's head and shoulders the best prospect as far as what his ceiling is. He has translatable traits that can work right now. So this pick makes sense.
Yeah, it's refreshing, right? Myles Garrett was the clear best player in this draft, and the Cleveland Browns did the right thing. They took him. They've got a cornerstone on their defense now. They've got a Von Miller-like player. They've got a Khalil Mack-like player. And now they have a ton of ammunition the rest of this draft to move up, maybe get their quarterback. But they did the right thing and got the best player in the draft right at number 1. Myles Garrett can do everything. He's a freak edge rusher, 35-plus inch arms. He's going to be a dominating pass rusher in the NFL.
Most importantly, I am 1 for 1 in my mock draft.
I think we're all undefeated right now.
Undefeated.
That's right. Yeah, let's enjoy it while it lasts.
Yes,
100%.
yes.
Now, Myles Garrett, I think it's almost a fact that he is a once in a 5 or 6 year type of prospect. What can you expect from that type of player year 1?
I think a lot of the parallels that have been drawn are to Jadeveon Clowney coming out of South Carolina before he went to the Houston Texans. And injuries aside, you still saw the need for continued development in the technical side of his game. He was just so used to being head and shoulders above everybody else as far as how explosive he was, how quick and strong he was, and that takes time. And you still see that with Myles Garrett, where some of the time he doesn't fully grasp just how good he can be yet. There's a matter of him understanding how to play off a contact and how to consistently anchor. Now, you did see the sack total went down this past year, but he was much more stout against the run this year. So I think he can translate immediately and make impact plays. It's just not he's going to reach his ceiling right away.
Yeah, one thing about your point there, I think he does have room to grow, and that's important. You don't want to take a maxed out player, but let's not forget this is a player that can dominate based on physical traits alone. He is explosive, he's got the length, he's got the size, he's got the strength, and I think right now he's an impact pass rusher in the NFL, and I think the Cleveland Browns fans can expect that, and there's room to grow, but his complete game needs to come together. But I think as a pass rusher, right away, I think he can make an impact.
Now with Garrett in the fold, what do you guys think? What is the target for the Browns defense? How good can they be next year immediately?
Well, that depends on what they choose to do from here. They've got 2 more picks in the next 32 picks starting right now.
Yes.
So I want to see them go out and get another impact playmaking defender on the defensive side of the ball. Maybe not a defensive lineman. They've invested recently in Danny Shelton, so maybe a splash linebacker or a safety prospect or a corner that's got ball skills and is a ball magnet. They need turnovers. They need to generate and defend the pass. So for Myles Garrett to be a cornerstone piece of that, that's going to be really important for them going forward.
Yeah, one thing that I think Myles Garrett's going to be able to bring to that defense is that pass rush. I know I'm not saying anything amazing with that, but you have weakness in the back end. The secondary is weak. Now you've got somebody that can get to the quarterback quick. You can, quote unquote, hide those defensive backs behind that and allow them to be a little bit more aggressive. So for me, when I look at the Browns the rest of the way, obviously they have a lot of draft capital. They need to consider moving up. They need to get their quarterback. So I think they still need help on defense, but they've got to go get their guy so they can compete. Right now, we already talked about Brock Osweiler once. He's not your guy. They need to get somebody that can play quarterback.
Where do you think they're going to go from here? Do you think they have to go quarterback at 12?
I think that depends on what the next 2 picks fall.
Sure.
That's going to be really big as far as determining. We talked about Tennessee or the New York Jets trading out of the middle of the top 10. If you see quarterbacks go now, I think it's going to change their approach. You may see them try to go for the discount rate at 33, or maybe trade back up and get that 5th year as we talked about before. It depends on how much capital they're willing to move, if they're willing to move.
Now we're going to turn our attention forward to the 2nd overall pick. There's been a trade. The Bears have actually traded up to the number 2 overall pick. What is it for? It has to be for a quarterback, right, Joe?
You would think it would be a quarterback, but this is an unpredictable draft, right? We have maybe tried to force quarterbacks into slots that they never had the value to begin with. So this will be interesting. I'm curious to see who they pick.
All right, with that, the pick is in. Or maybe not. But who do you think they're moving up for? Do you think it has to be a quarterback, or do you think they can maybe put in a defender on defense?
Well, I think the Bears have a lot of different avenues that they can go as far as they need secondary help, right?
Yeah.
Like the Fuller pick from a couple years ago did not manifest itself the way they would have liked it to. They need a quarterback. They signed Mike Glennon, but are we really going to sit here and assume that Mike Glennon is a long-term resolution for the Chicago Bears? It doesn't make any sense. So if they feel like that is their guy, it would explain why they're getting aggressive here, moving up, trading up a spot to guarantee that they're getting their guy here at this pick.
Do you like that? Do you like trading up one spot just to get your guy when you can just sit and you have the rest of the draft at your disposal?
I think it's interesting because if you're moving up one spot and the team is willing to deal with you, it tells you they're really not all that enamored in whoever you're trying to get. Now I can understand, let's go out and guarantee it. Let's lock it in. So if you're fine and it's a small price to pay, then make sure you get your guy.
All right, guys. Now the pick is actually officially in. With the 2nd overall pick, the Chicago Bears select Stanford defensive end Solomon Thomas.
Wow.
Really coming out of left field there. Joe, what are you thinking?
Well, I like Solomon Thomas a lot. This is a little bit surprising. Typically when you're trading up, it's going to be for a quarterback. But maybe the Stanford connection, right? We've got the possibility here where maybe San Francisco's looking at Mitch Trubisky, right? And John Lynch is their GM. And so they had eyes on him. They knew that he'd still maybe be available. But looking at Solomon Thomas and how he fits this Bears defense, he's an explosive rusher. He can beat blocks, right? That's one of my favorite things about him. This guy can quickly beat blocks, get after the quarterback, stop the run, get into backfields. They need a playmaker on defense, and they got their guy.
Yeah, so with this move, I like that they're starting and building from the inside out. They're taking a pass rusher. It's a splash play guy. And the fact that you compare this with last year's early draft selection in Leonard Fournette, you get a really nice foil of skills between those two guys now,
yes,
where you've got a power rusher and you've got or you've got a speed rusher to complement one another in that regard.
Well, it looks like
We have some breaking news.
We have some breaking news. Maybe it wasn't Solomon Thomas. We jumped the guns a little bit. It was a little bit of a surprise jumping up to number 2 for your defender, but it looks like the Chicago Bears actually did the right move. So with the second overall pick, the Bears actually select Mitchell Trubisky, North Carolina quarterback. Now this is something that we actually expected.
Yes.
What do you think about that?
This is more like it. I like you're going to be aggressive here. Go out and get a signal caller. The question was, what order are they going to go? And I had heard that Chicago was really taken by Deshaun Watson. But for Trubisky to go 2, I like the move. I think it makes sense. Trubisky is going to do very well as far as what his strengths are in Chicago. They had Jay Cutler there, push the ball down the field. Now they get the chance to do that with a younger guy and have the chance to break themselves of some of the turnover issues that they've had in the past.
Quarterback-driven league, right? You have to have your guy. Mike Glennon signed the contract, but it's a contract they can really get out of after the season. They've got a player in Mitch Trubisky who's probably a year away from truly starting, so they can let him learn the system, get his chemistry together, improve the infrastructure around him. And you get out of that Mike Glennon deal, and you've got your quarterback moving forward. Not bad. I'm always in favor of teams moving up to get quarterbacks. It's worth it.
Now, do we like Trubisky over Watson here?
I think so. I like his skill set. I think where he is at his best in the intermediates and the deeper portions of the field. You didn't see that with Deshaun Watson with consistency. So Trubisky is much more effective in the deeper portions. I think that's going to blend well with how they want to play their offense.
Yeah, no question. And the receiving core is going to be interesting, right? Kevin White's a player I liked a ton. They need him to be their number 1 receiver. It's time for him to stand and deliver. They've got some speed guys with Marcus Wheaton. So it's a nice blend of talent on the outside that they can work together to put together an offense that plays to Mitch Trubisky's strengths, to your point.
I still think they need help, though, not to interject.
Yeah, for sure.
As far as the boundary, if you're counting on Marcus Wheaton as your number 2, you need to go get some more guys.
Yeah.
And this is an opportunity for them. The early portions of the second round, if they want to commit and go that way and just, as you said, build up the infrastructure around Mitch Trubisky, now's the time to do that because you're going to have potentially a top-tier tight end that might slide out. You might have one of these pass catchers. There's a really definitive group of the top 3, and outside of that, you get into the second round and you have really nice names like Carlos Henderson from Louisiana Tech, explosive guys, Josh Reynolds from Texas A&M.
Now, how would you ideally like the Bears to develop Trubisky? Because we know how important it is when you draft a quarterback, you have to have a plan in place of how you're going to develop him. Is he a guy that steps in year 1, takes over Mike Glennon even though he got the contract, or is he going to sit for a year, maybe 2, as he develops?
I think now having Glennon, it's going to give you the luxury of protecting Trubisky. If you don't feel like he's ready, then you draw back on that. You let Glennon play, and not to call him a sacrificial lamb,
Sure.
but you let Glennon be the sacrificial lamb, where he's the guy that's going to go out and take his lumps while Trubisky gets the experience that he didn't have the luxury of having as only a 1-year player and 1-year starter at North Carolina.
Yeah, and North Carolina does run a wide open spread type system. There's a mix of full field reads, half field reads, but there's a transition. This isn't a team that huddled a lot. They wanted to play fast at North Carolina. So giving him the chance to come in and learn for at least 1 season is the right move. I mean, much has been made about Trubisky, 14 starts in his college career. So I think there's a lot of intangibles to develop. I was at the UNC Pro Day this year, had a chance to see that, get a chance to really get an up-close and personal look at Mitch Trubisky and how he runs a practice and interacts with his teammates. And he's got the intangibles. He's got the composure. He's got that presence about him to be a starting quarterback, but the learning curve from the football application side, playing in a pro scheme compared to North Carolina, he'll be well-served getting a chance to sit and learn.
Now turning to the 49ers side of the things, how do you like the trade from their point of view? They're trading away from a guy that everybody thought was their guy, their quarterback. Are you okay with them trading away from Trubisky, basically?
Well, if they make the move, it's very apparent that this is how they feel, that he's not the guy.
Yeah.
So if they don't feel he's the guy, they like somebody else, they're willing to move with a different player at a different position. They want to take care of the top end on the defensive side of the ball. You know, they're reportedly working and transitioning into a 4-3 front. They made a lot of investments the last 2 years into becoming a stout 3-4 defense. So Now the question becomes, are they going to make a move, try and get a pass rusher, a base 4-3 defensive end? Are they going to go linebacker? A lot of talent and a lot of different levels and playmakers here inside the top 5 for them to make a move for.
Well, what if maybe, just maybe, they thought Watson and Trubisky were similarly rated players, and they just let the Bears make that decision for them, and they have a lot of flexibility, they have a lot of needs. So trading back, acquiring some more picks really makes a lot of sense. They were able to pick up quite a bit. Looking over this, the number 3 pick, a 3rd round pick, a 4th round pick, and a 2018 3rd round pick to move back one slot.
Yeah.
You just were able to add a ton of capital to your ability to improve your roster.
They've given themselves a ton of flexibility.
Especially if they were never going to take Trubisky to begin with.
Right.
You're welcome. Here's a plate full of picks for you.
This is a deep draft class.
Yeah.
So now you've got an extra 3rd, an extra 4th.
Flexibility everywhere.
Man, and those are at the top of the round.
Yeah, big.
So now San Francisco is really going to be able to open up and add. They did this a couple years ago, and they took a couple redshirt players, were guys that were hurt. Now that you've got the opportunity in an extra deep class to maybe get 2nd round value players in the 3rd round.
John Lynch, this is his first year as a GM. This is his first draft.
Yeah.
He's not afraid to make a move. Not afraid to make a move. Not afraid to make a move. So now, 49ers on the clock at number 3. Joe, who are you expecting with number 3?
I'll tell you.
Is it quarterback they have to go to?
I think it's a possibility. Right now they have Brian Hoyer as their starting quarterback, who is the perfect bridge quarterback, right?
Yeah.
The 49ers are probably not going to be a competitive team next year, and they've got a guy that can get them through a season, right? Maybe Watson's in play. Maybe that's something we have to consider right here. I mentioned the Stanford connection, Solomon Thomas. I think that's a possibility for San Francisco, and it'll be very interesting because this is a team with a lot of needs, and there's a lot of value. John Lynch is making a bold statement right away. He's willing to move around. He's willing to be bold, and he's really positioned himself to really control a lot of the draft moving forward because they can move around. They can move up, down. San Francisco has really positioned themselves well to start building their roster right now.
You know who's sweating right now? The Cleveland Browns.
Oh, sure.
Because that was, by a lot of reports, their guy.
Yeah.
So now Deshaun Watson, you've heard them attached to a bit, and it feels like the other ones are sort of just by proxy. Patrick Mahomes, it's because he's there. That if you see in mock drafts or connections trying to be made, it's because he's the 3rd best quarterback in a class and they need a quarterback. So the Browns have to really start getting anxious here if this falls for them in the next couple picks.
And that's interesting because my knee-jerk reaction to seeing the terms of that trade were, wow, to move up one slot.
Yeah.
Maybe Cleveland was in play. They had to outbid Cleveland to get to that number 2 spot. I think that's a real possibility because that's a lot of capital, even to move up one spot. I know it's in the top 3. That's still a ton to give up.
Now, speaking of the 49ers, the pick is in. And with a 3rd overall pick, the San Francisco 49ers select Stanford defensive end Solomon Thomas. For real this time.
For real this time.
What are you thinking about that, Joe? He's your guy.
Yes.
This is your guy.
And I love the fit, right? So they've got their defensive coordinator, Robert Saleh. He's a Gus Bradley clone, right? A guy who's coached with him over the last 6 years. And we know that defense needs the Leo defensive end, a guy that's going to get into the backfield, that's going to pursue backside run plays, play side run, and rush the passer. Solomon Thomas profiles perfectly to fulfill that need. The defense that they want to run has a lot of 3-4 and a lot of 4-3 hybrid looks. But that Leo end is really the catalyst. Solomon Thomas does that. I think it's a lot of value, and they've got a ton of picks coming still.
Yeah, and he's really good at what he does,
Yeah.
which is play with power. He played a lot and was featured a lot as an interior defensive lineman at Stanford. Was able to play stout enough that he can make that work. So that continued and added flexibility is going to be interesting there if they get stand-up guys with guys like Ahmad Brooks standing up on the outside.
Yeah.
Maybe you kick him and Eric Armstead inside and let them be the 2 interior pass rushers on pass downs. So Thomas gives you some flexibility because of the way he was used as well.
Now, you mentioned he did a lot of stuff interiorly at Stanford. Do you think he can? You mentioned the Leo role. Could he even play that Michael Bennett role, that defensive end, defensive tackle hybrid where he's rushing off the outside? They put him inside against a slower guard, really a matchup nightmare?
Yeah, I think that's something we want to say is true for a lot of players. I think it's really true about Solomon Thomas, a guy that can attack interior gaps, win from the outside, still a little unproven, but he's got the traits. He's got the length. He's got the speed to do it. So absolutely, I think he is very much a Michael Bennett type player.
Yeah, and his best rushes were from the inside.
Yes.
He's not a guy that has a ton of twitch to win along the outside. So putting him inside is really going to accentuate what he does well and where he's going to translate right now.
Now, does it worry you guys at all that most of his production was from the inside, and we're projecting him to play as an outside defensive end? I mean, at his college, we never saw his ability to really rush off the edge consistently.
Sure, and I think when he came into the combine, he tested really well.
Yeah.
Like a lot better than people thought he was going to test. But he also came in a lot lighter than I was expecting. I was expecting maybe 280, 285. He came in at, I believe, 273 is where he came in at the combine. So I think if you put the weight, it seemed like he played heavier. So if you let him put the weight back on, play to strength, and be a strength player, he may never be a 15-sack player, and that's okay. But he's going to be a guy that's consistent at the point of attack. He's going to dominate offensive tackles. He's going to win inside against guards. So I'm not worried about his production. I just think you have to come at this angle with specific expectations.
Yeah, and one thing about that, he's a little bit light to be playing on the inside in the NFL, and that's why I like him so much in that Leo role where the run fit's not all that important. It's about getting into the backfield. And this is going to give him a chance to play to his strengths, and he can beat blocks. He's quick. He can work into the neutral zone quickly. He has the length. He's got the power. But I'm not going to ask him to hold up against NFL drive blockers at guard. That's not going to be something that he's going to excel. But he can shoot those gaps and win with quickness and speed.
Now, is this the type of guy that's a double-digit sack guy? When you're moving, when you're in the top 5 and you're picking a defensive end, you want this guy to be your guy. He's your dude. You want double-digit sacks from him year 2, year 3, year 4. You want him to be that kind of a guy. Is this that kind of a guy?
I think your expectation for him is 8 to 12 sacks per year. Understanding some of them are on the inside. Joe's giving me a look, so I don't know how he feels about that. But at the same time, pass rush productivity can be taken from a number of different angles. So if you're looking at strictly sacks, guy gets what, maybe 500 rush attempts in the course of a season. If you get home on 8 to 12, I think that's a perfectly realistic expectation for a guy that plays with power, can get moved around so he really accentuates where the mismatches are along the opposing offensive line. That's my expectation.
Sure.
That has to be your expectation for a top 3 defensive end.
Yeah, I think by definition of a top 3 defensive end, you need to see that. It's a little bit concerning with Solomon Thomas because I don't know if he's going to be that right away. This is a redshirt sophomore, and I think he's going to have to learn his role. I mean, he played a lot lining up over guards at Stanford. He's going to be playing on the edge, attacking gaps outside in. I think it's just going to be something that he's going to have to learn. I think he's going to be more of a year 3 guy, year 2, year 3 than a year 1 guy. And I get the expectation, right? We've got two pass rushers in the top 3 picks.
Yeah.
And
It's a new league.
It's a new league. Getting after the passer is huge. It's paramount. And we've seen that unfold right here early in this draft.
And when you do evaluations, Joe, this is something that you're new with as far as the way you conduct your assessments. But when I do my assessments, I'm looking at premier positions.
Yes.
These are the 2 premier positions in the NFL. You either have a passer or you attack a passer. That's the ways that you win in today's NFL because the game is so oriented around the passing game and the rules in place. So, Thomas, Joe, for both you and I, we were a little different as far as where we stood on him as a prospect and some of the concerns that you voiced as far as the transition immediately is exactly why I had him as my 4th rated pass rusher in this class. He was behind Myles Garrett, Jonathan Allen, and TJ Watt from Wisconsin.
Yeah, I bought into the upside very much with Solomon Thomas, and I think San Francisco did too. Made him a top 5 pick.
Now, it's time the Jaguars.
Yes.
The pick is in. So with the 4th overall pick, the Jacksonville Jaguars take LSU running back Leonard Fournette. This is something we talked about leading up to the draft. How surprised are you? Are you not surprised? Is this a good pick?
You got to give this one to Joe
yeah.
because he's the one that sold me on this 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, thank you. This is perfect, right? This is a team that needs a running game that they can rely on. In the pre-show, we talked about how they need balance on offense, big time. They're trusting way too much Blake Bortles. He needs a best friend, and that's a running game. Leonard Fournette can be your bell cow back. He can be the focal point of the offense and let the passing game be more complementary to the running game. They've not had running back production in a long time in Jacksonville.
2009, I believe.
That's right. Yeah, that's a long time.
That's unheard of. So, as we said in the pre-show, the expectations here have to be tempered a little bit because Jacksonville's offensive line,
That's right.
they're fairly thin. They signed Luke Jokel, but they're starting Brandon Linner, A.J. Cann, Jeremy Parnell are currently listed as starting players along this offensive line. So the fact that I believe Jokel left via free agency, so he's even departed from here. They traded for Brandon Albert from the Miami Dolphins, and Albert is a player that hasn't played in 16 full games in I think 5 or 6 years. So the durability questions are there. They really need to work now and focus on, okay, you have somebody you feel is a franchise quarterback. You have somebody that you feel can be your bell cow back. Now you have to piggyback off of that.
Now, do you see this as a pick for Blake Bortles, giving him his last chance, giving him all the weapons that he can have to see if he really is that franchise signal caller, or is it already done? He's not it.
It has to be.
Yeah, absolutely. And what this does is maybe it brings more defenders into the box, opens things up in the passing game, less bodies, less spacing to deal with. They've got a good group of receivers in Jacksonville, and I think this is a move that does make a statement to Blake Bortles, hey, we're giving you everything you need.
Yeah, so especially with the first-time head coach, you're going in, this is the assessment year, understanding that you have to perform now. If you do not, it's time for Jacksonville to begin looking elsewhere for their franchise quarterback.
Now, in terms of value, how do you feel about picking a running back in the top 5, a position that has been shown that you can go and get a guy that'll get you 1,000 yards?
Well, I think this is where it gets dangerous for casual fans on the outside looking in, because if you're taking Leonard Fournette, and you know the Dallas Cowboys took Leonard Fournette with the 4th overall pick last year, Leonard Fournette's going to be this year's Ezekiel Elliott. That line of thinking, it's not a one-to-one correlation between the two. So the expectation for Fournette is going to be different. I don't mind the value if you feel like the style and brand of football that you want to play is there. Fournette was my 19th rated player on the board. He's inside my top 32 picks. He was not a first-round value for me. As far as in a vacuum, Fournette's a player that I'm targeting immediately at the start of the 2nd round. But if you, again, getting into scheme specifics, if they feel like this is the brand of football we want to play, then hey, go out and get your guy.
You know, for the next however long, 5 years, we're going to see graphs that are going to compare Ezekiel Elliott and Leonard Fournette. So get used to it, folks. But that's really unfair. Really different situations. The Cowboys' offensive line is the best in football.
Yeah.
Jacksonville's offensive line is probably in the bottom 5 or 10. So when you talk about that more specifically as it relates to Fournette, this is a guy who's going to require bodies to be moved in front of him. This isn't a great vision running back, but this is a rare blend of size, speed, and power. So if he can get those bodies moved, oh man, no, people need to make business decisions if they're going to tackle him or not, because he's going to run them over. He's not going to give you a lot of production in the passing game. That's something that we see from Ezekiel Elliott. So let's not compare the two. They're individual people in individual unique situations. Unfortunately, it's going to be part of what comes with this. But Leonard Fournette is going to need some help, and will be interesting to see how Jacksonville goes about improving that offensive line to maximize what they just invested, a top 5 pick and a running back, Leonard Fournette.
Now, the Jaguars, they're a team in free agency the last 2 years. They've been the big winners. They've spent the big dollars. Are they ready to win now? Are they a fringe playoff team in the AFC? Especially in an AFC South that is not that strong.
I don't think so. I think Tennessee is really going to emerge here, provided Marcus Mariota returns to form from his injury late in the year last year. They have a lot of pieces. They have a lot of capital. They are on the clock right now. They have the 18th overall selection as things stand right now. They really have the chance to really go out, fortify the boundary of their roster. Yep. The Houston Texans are stacked as a roster. They're simply missing the quarterback. They get the quarterback piece. That's 2 teams in front of Jacksonville that I think are head and shoulders. Now, Jacksonville's done a really nice job investing, especially on the defensive side of the ball with some of their early talent with Devontae Fowler, Miles Jack, Jalen Ramsey there. They have a lot of splash athletes. That seems to be what they gravitate towards. So now it's getting everything on the same page, and for them, it's really going to come down to is Blake Bortles the guy or not.
Now, you mentioned the Titans. For me, I thought this was the team in the top 10 that could really change everything what's going to happen, with trades, and who are they going to pick? If they stay in and pick, who are the guys you think they'll consider, Joe?
Now, Tennessee's got to love the way the draft's come together so far, right? They've got their pick of the litter of wide receivers, so if they like Mike Williams, which has been a name that's been linked to them, he's right there for you. Corey Davis, who I think is the best receiver in this class, right there for you. Maybe you want to get that second tight end to complement Delanie Walker. You know that Mike Mularkey wants to do 2 tight end sets. You've got O.J. Howard. You've got a chance to get one of the safeties, right? Jamal Adams, who I think is one of the best safety prospects to come along in years, is right there for you. Malik Hooker, if you want the ball hawk, he's there. your choice of cornerback, Marshawn Lattimore. If you're comfortable with his hamstrings, he's right there for you. So Tennessee is in a great position, and we know they've been linked to trading back, and that's a possibility as well. So this will be interesting.
Now, Kyle, instead of who they should pick, who do you think is the guy left that can give them the most year one production?
Probably Jamal Adams. You look at their secondary, Logan Ryan, LaShawn Sims, Jonathan Cyprien, and Searcy are their starting four on the back end. They need bodies. Let's call a spade here. And I know Joe was very quick to mention offensive weapons, and I'm all about optimizing what Marcus Mariota can do. But he was an efficient passer last year with what he had. You look at the back end of their defense, they were 30th in the league last year in passing defense. They gave up nearly 270 passing yards a game.
Yep.
Now, some of that's improved by your pass rush, but a lot of that has to be the quality of the players that you have in the secondary.
Now, the Titans, you talk about defense. Joe, do you see this as a possibility to go offense? Do you see like a Corey Davis possibly going with number 5?
For me, they should really think about taking Corey Davis. I don't know if that's going to be the type of value that we're going to see right here based on the rumblings before the draft. So this will be a very, very curious decision for me. Maybe a trade, who knows? But it's in play. It should be in play.
And the fascinating thing about this is Corey Davis had such strong tape, and he didn't run a 40 time. And now all of a sudden there's all these questions regarding the merits of Corey Davis. So I'm interested to see where they put the emphasis here, where they choose to go.
Yep.
Now, the pick is in, speaking of them, and with the 5th overall pick, the Tennessee Titans do select your man, Corey Davis. Kyle, you've been waiting for this.
Is it okay?
This is the guy.
Great
This is the
news.
guy that you went on Twitter rampages about. This is the guy you talked about constantly. You must be happy.
This
You know,
shakes it.
I went on probably a 2-hour spree when people started questioning Corey Davis as a prospect.
With a fantastic article at FanRag.
Yeah, with a fantastic article. So a lot of that film study was supplemented in that article, and it highlights the questions around Corey Davis were level of competition and how fast is he. There's endless examples of him producing against Big Ten competition, a Purdue team that had 2 NFL corners on it in 2015, Michigan State with Darqueze Dennard, a first-round draft selection, and Trey Waynes, a 2015 first-round draft selection, and Ohio State. The production's there. This just is the film winning out, and I cannot be happier.
Yeah, you know, you look at the investment they made in Marcus Mariota, and he deserves to have all the weapons around him to succeed. The receiving options are not very exciting. Well, they are now. Corey Davis, number 5 player on my board, number 2 player on Kyle Crabb's board. They went out and got the best receiver in the class, a guy with amazing ability after the catch, and he's the alpha type receiver that can go attack the football in the air. I love the pick.
Now, you mentioned a guy that Jamal Adams could be the best production year one. What kind of production can Corey Davis give them year one?
I think Corey Davis has the opportunity to be a very productive rookie receiver, provided that he gets a lot of chemistry down here in training camp and Mariota is able to throw. But he's a very polished player, and I think that can't be understated.
Yeah, so I think he's ready to compete right away. I know the lower level of competition is something that's been mentioned, but he's ready to become a number 1 receiver in the NFL right away, and they need him to be that.
Now, how does this help Marcus Mariota? You know, he's a young quarterback. He's still developing. Is this going to really help his where he's going to be in 2, 3, 4 years? Is he going to be able to jump into that top couple tiers?
Yeah, and the reason why is because I think where Mariota is at his best, he throws intermediate routes really well. He throws with timing very well. That's one thing that he didn't get enough credit for coming out of Oregon when he came out in 2015, is the timing's there. Yeah. He understands, he has the internal clock. Back foot is on the ground, understanding the ball has to come out. Corey Davis runs those routes with precision and the intent to break off at the appropriate time, at the appropriate landmarks, so that those balls, even if he's facing tight coverage, Corey Davis can make a play on the football.
Yeah, I'm excited about what he's going to offer him over the middle of the field. This is a guy that's a fearless worker in that area. I've actually compared him to Andre Reed, who's one of the best middle of the field receivers in the history of the game. Big-time yards after the catch guy, physical. He can make guys miss. So I like that he's a 3-level threat, guy that can take quick screens, take them to the house, work the middle parts of the field, and push the defense vertically. I think this is the number 1 receiver Marcus Mariota needed.
Now, the Titans, they're a team, you know, they love to run the ball. They love to pound the rock, DeMarco Murray.
Exotic smash mouth.
Yeah, exotic smash mouth. Now, a very important part of that is wide receiver blocking. Is Davis going to be able to contribute in that kind of area?
Yeah, he's a house. He gets under guys' pads. He's very physical, very sticky, very tenacious. I think he has the mirror skills to be just as effective of what a bigger body in Mike Williams would be as a blocker, even though Mike is bigger.
Yeah, I think it's something he's going to have to do, right? It's creating offense for his team. And in Western Michigan, it was a lot of that quick passing game that he had to block. And I think he'll continue to do that in the NFL. One thing I never questioned one time when watching Corey Davis on tape is play strength and physicality. That'll show up as a blocker.
Yeah.
All right, now moving ahead. Number 6, a very interesting team here. The Jets, they got both the safeties on the board. Is that where they're going to go here?
Yeah, I don't know if I would necessarily want to peg it right down and call my shot, but they have to be very happy with the way the board fell with 3 offensive players going really at positions that outside of Trubisky weren't really on their radar or pegged as players that they were attached to.
Yeah, no question. Quarterback, I think it's got to be in play. Deshaun Watson is right there. I'm not overly excited about Bryce Petty and Christian Hackenberg competing for my starting quarterback job. We've talked about this being a quarterback-driven league. I don't know if the Jets will do it, but I think they need to be thinking about Deshaun Watson right here.
Now, with the Jets, how do you think a guy like Malik Hooker would fit in there? You know, a single high safety, a guy that can really take away the deep middle part of the field, a playmaker. Is that something that should intrigue them?
Very much so. Right now they're playing Calvin Pryor, their first-round pick a couple years ago, who's really more of a box safety in those deeper portions of the field. So when you look at Malik Hooker potentially in this spot, you may be able to get better in 2 positions. Getting Calvin Pryor closer to the line of scrimmage where he truly belongs, and then you have that big-time deep zone defender that has range and can break on the football. So that should be something, again, the Jets have need something they should also be considering.
Now, how important is this pick to Mike Maccagnan's job? You know, he's a guy, he hasn't had the best drafting as lately. He's kind of on the hot seat. Does he have to nail this pick? And if he does have to nail this pick, who's the type of player that he needs to get? Is he going to get a quarterback and maybe buy himself a couple years of development, or is he going to go straight for a productive day 1 starter?
Well, I think even if the Jets punt on Christian Hackenberg's selection last year with a 2nd-round pick, he's not going to buy himself time. You know, the admirable thing to do if they believe he's not the guy, which a lot of people believe he's not, would be to take and cut your losses and move on and find a signal caller that you can attach yourself to. But I don't think that's going to excuse some of the poor decisions that they've made in utilizing their draft capital in the past couple of years. So I think to answer your question, somebody like Jamal Adams or Malik Hooker, Hooker seems to be a better fit for their roster and what they have in the secondary. Somebody that can contribute day 1 is going to help them to optimize the chances to win now, which is what they have to do. They have to start winning football games.
Now, with a guy like Hooker, Joe, are you worried about him coming off an injury? We don't have a 40 time on him. We don't have any times. We don't know how explosive he is. Is that something that worries you about his projection going forward, or is his film just too good that you don't have no issues?
His film in the areas that identify athleticism is very good. We've seen this guy cover range. I know everyone wants to talk about the interception against Clemson where he just covered rare amounts of football field to make that interception. He's not a guy that I have questions about, just like Corey Davis. We don't have that information of Corey Davis. He just went number 5 overall. And something that I don't really worry about when I think about Malik Hooker. He's got plenty of play speed. He's going to be just fine.
It's the same thing where we know what his explosiveness is, even though we don't know it. You know, the plays in which he's playing deep center field and making plays on the ball really shine and show what his talent can do.
Now, guys, we talked about the options. The pick is in. With the 6th overall pick, the New York Jets select Jamal Adams from LSU, safety. We talked about it. How do you feel now that it's happened, Joe?
Yeah, so I like this. I know we talked a lot about Malik Hooker. The reality is Jamal Adams is the better prospect. And I know that Hooker would complement Calvin Pryor more, but I don't think that's good enough to pass on the better talent. You have Jamal Adams that can still give you that deep zone ability. He can cover from the slot. He's a big-time tackler. He's an aggressive underneath zone defender. Checks every box in terms of playing safety. The better player than Hooker. They went with what I would have done if I was thinking safety there.
No, I'm totally on the same page as far as much more well-rounded skill set is going to be able to give them multiplicity in the back end, where Malik Hooker is going to be your single high free safety, and that is it. So for him to give them multiplicity on a defensive unit that loves to bring pressure and move people around, this slot does make a lot of sense.
Now, in terms of going back to the Jamal Hooker versus Malik Hooker debate, or Jamal Adams versus Malik Hooker, my bad, debate. Does Malik Hooker have the rarer skill set, that deep middle Earl Thomas type skill set that could make maybe his value is more important, even though he's not as well-rounded of a player as Jamal Adams?
He has a rare ability to function in deep zones and attack the football and cover ground. But his ability to play forward is nothing like Jamal Adams. And so it depends on, I guess, how you like your ice cream. But in terms of
ice cream,
cake, whatever you want to eat, whatever dessert you choose, I think it does come down to preference. But for me, the overall package, I still get that deep range and the ball skills from Adams. But I get so much more playing forward. I get a guy that can play in the slot and cover. I don't see that from Malik Hooker. So I like the well-rounded, more complete skill set that Jamal Adams gives you. He's an experienced player in the SEC. And I just really, I mean, you're talking about, for me, players that are very much in different tiers overall.
Yeah, and the difference between the two that really stood out for me is Hooker can hit, but he's selective with his hitting. He's got to know the receiver has his eyes away from him when he's closing in space for him to really run through bodies. Whereas Adams is aggressive, charging down into the box. There are some reps in which he'll overrun that, but that's with the understanding that he's making so many more influence plays in all phases of the game instead of being a splash player in just one phase of the position.
Okay, so I know you guys are Jamal Adams fans. How does he improve the Jets' defense right now? You know, they have a really good, a good front seven with guys like Leonard Williams, Muhammad Wilkerson, Sheldon Richardson, for now. How does he improve their defense? Can they take another step up, or do they still need way too much other talent? Maybe at the cornerback positions, at linebacker?
Well, they need a lot of help, but let's not understate what Jamal Adams can do for this team in light of not having a ton of talent. Because he is so versatile, he's going to allow a lot of multiplicity for that scheme. It's going to allow them to mix things up. He's a guy that can show late in different coverages and disguise things. Now, I don't think the Jets are ready to compete in the AFC East right away, but Tom Brady's in that division. That quick passing game, that ability to close down quickly and tackle against quick passes is going to be huge. And his ability to go fly into the boundary and make plays is going to be huge. When you have that good of a front seven in front of him, not front seven, but a front four, it's really going to accentuate what he gives you because he can be more aggressive.
Yeah, so Adams, again, going back to the way the Jets and Coach Bowles like to play defense, is they like to bring pressure. They like to play aggressive. Adams is an aggressive player. He's an overhang safety. He can play on that 2.5 level where he's behind the linebackers, but he's not deep in the secondary. And being able to be multiple, whether that's man-to-man coverage, being a blitz player, or being an overhang run support as an extra defender in the box, all of those things are going to really supplement what they do well. The question for them now, for me, is where's Calvin Pryor fit in this? Because he's much more dimensional, or one-dimensional, as far as he's more of a box safety. Yeah. He is a pure nickel linebacker type of player where the reps that he spends in coverage are not very strong. So the big question for me is Adams is the player that you center your safeties around, and now the other piece that was there is the one that you kind of have to work and find a home for.
I give the Jets a lot of credit for that because, like we mentioned, Hooker complements Pryor better. But you didn't let Calvin Pryor dictate not taking the overall better prospect. So I think that's a problem that is a good problem because I don't think you would have just taken Malik Hooker because of the complementary piece. You know, if you don't have a lot of faith in Calvin Pryor, who's not giving you much reason to believe in, you know, there's no reason to let him dictate such a pivotal decision for them right here in the top 6.
I mean, you guys obviously broke down Jamal Adams very well on the field. But a huge attractive part of picking Adams is what he brings off the field, his leadership. They said his leadership was renowned at LSU. Is that something, especially in a locker room like the New York Jets that was crumbling last year, is that as important as his on-the-field traits?
Sure. Having workers is really important, and LSU is not a school that shies away from calling out players that don't work. I don't know if you guys remember a couple years ago.
That's right.
Some scouts were in town, and the strength and conditioning coach wrote a note up on the board and left it on the glass saying the guys that were skipping out of their workouts. So for Adams to be a player that was a leader on that team, I think is really important because they have to reshape not just the talent on the field, but the overall culture and approach of the players in the building.
Okay, now we're going to switch gears. We're going to go ahead to the Chargers. They're moving to Los Angeles. They got to make a splash. They don't have a fan base there. What kind of pick would energize that fan base?
I'm not sure this would be an energizing the fan base type pick. And I know we're going to keep talking about safeties, but this is a place where I kind of like the idea of Malik Hooker.
The theme.
Yeah, so you've got a pass rush in front of them centered around Joey Bosa, who's going to be a stud pass rusher for a long time. You've got Melvin Ingram. And so when you can think about a player like Malik Hooker roaming on the back end of that pass rush, where he can really influence and accentuate what he does in terms of breaking on the football, covering ground, and functioning in those deep zones, I see interceptions. So I think that's a possibility here.
Now, are you in the same, are you Hooker here?
I got my mock draft right in front of me here, and this was from Monday, LA Chargers, Malik Hooker. That was the pick that I made in my mock draft, so that's the pick I'm hoping and expecting to see here now. My goal throughout this segment is to call them the LA Chargers the entire time. So bear with me if we slip on it. But looking at the other pieces that they have in the secondary, Casey Hayward was a free agent signing, and then Jason Verrett was their 2014 first-round draft selection. So they have a nice pair of bookends on the boundary that you can work with that have quickness. So now complementing that with a guy in Malik Hooker who has top-end range, can play numbers to numbers as a deep center field safety, is really going to allow them to accentuate the pressure that they have, maybe bring some of the other second-level players. Denzel Perryman's on the middle of that defense as well, and while he's not the most loose or twitched-up player, he's a powerful player. He's a strong presence between the tackles. He can be an A-gap blitzer. So the more safety net that the Chargers have on the back end, the more it's going to forgive them needing or wanting to bring the extra players into the box.
You know, that's a strong possibility, right? The defense here going Malik Hooker, but we'll see, right?
Well, guys, the pick is in. So with the 7th overall pick, the Los Angeles Chargers go with Mike Williams, Clemson wide receiver. Surprise, game changer. Kyle, what do you think?
This was something that I'm not necessarily taken aback by because Corey Davis is off the board. And their feature receiver there in Keenan Allen has not been able to stay healthy in the long term. So adding someone like Mike Williams, the Chargers understand they have an aging quarterback. They're working with a limited window if they want to try to win. So adding pieces around what they have on offense makes sense.
You know, it's interesting. We spent some time with Chris Schubert this morning doing a mock draft on 1060 NBC Radio here in Phoenix. And this is the exact situation we were presented where I was the choice, the picker for the Chargers, and I went Mike Williams for the reasons Kyle said. You've got a limited window with Phillip Rivers. He needs to have weapons around him. And Mike Williams is a catch point guy, not a great separator. Phillip Rivers is the type of quarterback that's not afraid to test those situations. I think this is a really good marriage.
Now, do you think this is the Chargers trying to set their offense up for maybe their next quarterback? So when he comes in, he has a plethora of options to go to. They drafted Melvin Gordon last year. Now they go to the well with Mike Williams. How does that offense looking, not just for next year with Phillip Rivers, maybe a couple years down the road with a new quarterback?
Well, I think having pieces is going to be important for whoever they choose is going to be the future of their franchise there, because you don't want a situation in which a player is thrown to the wolves and he's very limited with the options that he has. You saw that this year with Carson Wentz, who started out very strong in the first month of the season in September and really faded down the stretch just because receivers couldn't win anything on one-on-one. So having a big body like Mike Williams, who even when he's covered, he can still be open, is going to be a nice game changer.
Yeah, Los Angeles, or previously San Diego's, they've really been a team that struggled to be healthy there. Keenan Allen's injured a lot. They tried to try out Stevie Johnson. They need something that's going to be sure. Mike Williams gives them a chance to have that alpha #1 type wide receiver.
Now, you guys both wanted Malik Hooker here. Are you happy with Mike Williams, or do you think it's not the right value?
He would not have been my selection here, but it's ironic because Hooker, for the reasons we concerned in talking about him, and Williams for some of his route running acumen and ability to consistently create separation, were both players that I was not especially high on. I think the Chargers could have gone a lot of different directions. I like the thought process behind Williams, even though drawing the lines and the scheme fit for Hooker, it would have been something I could have gotten bored on as well.
Yeah, Mike Williams is a player that I number 11 player on my board. So this isn't bad value in my opinion. I really do believe in his ability to win in those one-on-ones. And one thing that is very important to mention when you talk about our evaluations is that it does impact different schemes differently. Mike Williams is more valuable to a team like the Los Angeles Chargers than he's going to be other teams. So even more so, that makes this a pick that I can get behind because I think it's such a great fit.
Now, Elliot Christ at NDTscouting.com had a great article talking about how important is separation for a wide receiver. You guys said that Williams isn't the type of guy that's going to create a lot of organic separation at the top of routes or in his breaks. Does that worry you? Or is he that much of a dominant ball skills type of receiver, playing above the rim kind of guy, that you're not that worried?
I see when I watch Williams' tape, he can win certain routes. He can win certain routes with strength and his length. And he wins with timing routes. He and Deshaun Watson were on the same page quite frequently as far as winning 50-50 balls and back shoulder throws and high point catches. Now, I am concerned somewhat in watching Mike Williams that he's not always the most aggressive to reach out and extend for the football. So when Williams has the opportunity and he's got a defender right on his hip pocket, he needs to capitalize on that length with more consistency, and that's why I was a little bit lower on him, not necessarily because I didn't think he was not going to be able to win without winning separation.
All right, now moving ahead to the number 8 overall pick with the Carolina Panthers. The pick is in. So with the 8th overall pick, the Carolina Panthers select Christian McCaffrey, Stanford running back. The last pick, a little bit of a surprise, but Joe, we knew McCaffrey was coming here, didn't we?
Yeah, this is one that I've felt good about for a while. Really like how he fits this team. Carolina, you look at him, Cam Newton, his confidence was shook last year. That's something that Ron Rivera came out and said. On top of that, this is a player that's not going to be able to practice until July with his surgery. This year, more than ever, the running game is important for Carolina. They get a guy in Christian McCaffrey that can run between the tackles, press the boundary, and then he's a dominant receiving threat. So his ability to work with Cam Newton on quick routes out of the backfield is going to be especially important this year. This is a really good fit.
Yeah, the extra layers here. You know, some people question, does McCaffrey fit the scheme and the style of play? And it's the foil, it's the complement to that which really makes it such a great value, where now you have somebody that can win in the other areas of the playbook where somebody like Jonathan Stewart would not be able to.
Yeah, you touched on that Jonathan Stewart being there. Is this going to be a kind of a dual running back situation, or do you see McCaffrey taking that job by the horns and becoming the bell cow type of back?
I see in the long term McCaffrey's going to be the feature guy there. I think it would be wise to capitalize on Stewart while you can, but also with the understanding that this is a former first-round running back in his own regard, but he hasn't been able to stay healthy. He hasn't played 16 games since 2011.
Yeah, no question, and he's on the wrong side of 30.
Yeah.
But they did just sign him to a 2-year extension. So I think this is a really nice complementary situation. Number one, Jonathan Stewart, Mike Tolbert's not on this team anymore, so let's not forget about that. Jonathan Stewart can really embrace that power runner role out of the backfield, do a lot of the things that Mike Tolbert was doing, and do a lot of things that they've been asking Cam Newton to do in terms of running the football. You take hits off Cam Newton by being able to use Jonathan Stewart more how he wins, and you've got a beautiful complement in Christian McCaffrey. This is a pick that gets me pretty excited because it's such a great fit at such a great time, and you have such a great complement in terms of what you get from Stewart and McCaffrey, where McCaffrey can eventually become the feature of that offense and take a lot off of Cam Newton is something that needs to happen.
Now we look micro what he does for the offense. How does he go for the whole team as a whole? Is this a type of move that moves the Panthers back to the top of the NFC South? Or are they still going to have to fight and claw and they still need to make other moves day 2, day 3?
Well, I think they really had a down year last year because you could see last year's draft class, I don't believe they invested a single pick in the offensive side of the football. Where they need to go from here, they need to continue to piggyback off of this. They need to get reliable players at the offensive tackle position. They neglected that all of last year, and it really showed with the beating that Cam Newton took the entire year. So now, working off of this pick, last year they invested in the secondary. They got players like James Bradbury and Darryl Worley from West Virginia two guys that started a lot of games for them. Now invest on the offensive side of the ball, protect your franchise quarterback, protect your top 10 overall pick here in Christian McCaffrey, and make the most of it.
And don't forget about the homecoming on defense, right? We've got Julius Peppers back on the fold. We've got Captain Marlin back in the fold. So maybe that gives them more flexibility to improve the offense. Again, Cam Newton is this team. The Carolina Panthers go as Cam Newton goes. So giving him a weapon like Christian McCaffrey impacts the entire team because I think it makes Cam Newton better, and that makes them better everywhere.
Okay, now moving ahead to the Cincinnati Bengals, a very interesting team in the top 10 that doesn't get a lot of talk. You know, maybe they could go pass rusher. Is that what they're going? Do you think they're going pass rusher number 9, or what else do you think they could possibly do?
The Bengals have a very specific mold for pass rushers that they like. They like long bodies. They like length at the arms, and I don't know necessarily if any of the longer pass rushers, whether that's Taco Charlton from Michigan, I don't know if they're in play. But I think they would be well served to look at John Allen from Alabama here. This was a player that was generally considered a consensus top 5 prospect all throughout the season. He comes into the combine, and at 286, he runs 5 seconds in his 40-yard dash, and now we're all questioning his athleticism. He doesn't win with athleticism. And a player like Allen, much like we just got done talking about with Solomon Thomas when he was selected from the 49ers, there is an ability there to play him as a base end in your base sets and then kick him inside, let him be an interior pass rusher next to Geno Atkins in your passing down situations, and that would be a home run opportunity for them as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, I like that a lot, and obviously a need given they need a complement to Carlos Dunlap. You know, Michael Johnson's been below par, and he's a free agent after the season. Wallace Gilberry, the same thing. They need a player now and for the future. Another name to keep in mind, Derek Barnett out of Tennessee. You know, this is a really nice prototype for a 4-3 defense. He gives you that experience, a guy that's dominated the SEC, who would really fit in terms of complementing Carlos Dunlap.
But my curiosity there is he does not fit their mold as a pass rusher. So
Felt that coming, Krebs.
When Taco Charlton's name was really hot in November and December, that was a home run mock for people because they said, oh, he's got the length that they look for, the size that they look for. Now we're kind of curious as far as, okay, is the value not there? Are they going to look for a long arm guy later in the draft? Or are they going to go another option we haven't even talked about? We haven't even considered the offensive side of the football with the Bengals.
Sure, yeah, and look at their offensive line, right? This is a situation where they've invested a lot of draft picks, but not a lot of return. I mean, the interior is a major concern from that team. You know, guard, center, they can use improvements. Forrest Lamps on the board, that would be a little higher than I anticipate, somewhere that I'm comfortable taking him. But the Cincinnati Bengals have a lot of options, and this would be an interesting pick.
Yeah. They're an interesting team because the Bengals have the smallest scouting staff in the NFL.
I believe they 5 or 6 folks on
They
their
rely
staff.
heavily on their coaches. Yeah. How does that change your thinking as somebody who does mock drafts, who tries to project picks, when you know a team that's going to be a lot of the heavy work is going to be done by coaches, so they're going to want guys that are ready-made to contribute.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think it makes it easier, too, to understand what their quote-unquote type is, too. Offensive linemen, for example, Jake Fisher and Cedric Ogbuehi are their slated tackles right now. Those two players are very similar as far as their strength. They're mirror tackles. They move very well. They're able to slide their feet and stay framed against pass rushers. The questions there for both of those guys were some technique issues and some functional strength issues.
Another position that comes to mind, linebacker, right? This is a team
they love their 2-down linebackers in Cincinnati.
Well, how about some speed? How about some speed at linebacker from Cincinnati? And that's something I'm not ruling out. Reuben Foster is a player that's going to be difficult to project this draft. Hassan Reddick out of Temple is a player that could be very much in play
very
here.
Very realistically see him being
absolutely,
here too.
Absolutely.
So adding versatility, I think, for them is really going to be the key piece as far as what direction they choose to go.
All right, guys. Well, the pick is in. With the 9th overall selection, the Cincinnati Bengals select Washington wide receiver John Ross. Now, Kyle, this is a guy that you said might fall out of the first round.
Give it to him.
Kyle's not happy. Joe, this is a guy that fell out of the first round of our accumulative mock draft we did this morning. Are you surprised him going in the top 10?
Unfortunately, I'm not surprised because the NFL becomes enamored with certain things. And we've got a guy here in John Ross that is the fastest human being to ever run a 40-yard dash in the history of the scouting combine. With that said, you just took him with the 9th overall pick in the draft. You forsake all the pass rushers, the linebackers in play, to get a 5'11", 188-pound wide receiver that's had 3 knee surgeries and just had shoulder surgery. I don't like this pick at all for Cincinnati, and I'm not going to be kind about it.
Now, is this the one pick, the real head scratcher of the top 10 for you, Kyle?
This has to be. Yeah, so Ross, look at their receiving core. They have A.J. Green, they have Tyler Boyd, they have Brandon LaFell. This is totally out of left field as far as the scheme fit. Andy Dalton's not a great vertical passer.
No.
He does not have a great deep arm. So now you're considering, okay, is this somebody that's even going to be able to push the ball down the field and get this to 4-2-2? And I've been very vocal in the pre-draft process talking about the merits of 4-2-2 and the diminishing returns that from running a 4-3-2 and a 4-2-2, you're 3 extra percentile higher. You're going from the 96th percentile at 4-3-2 to 4-2-2 and the 99th percentile. So you're really mortgaging a lot here for very marginal additional gains as far as a vertical receiver.
3 wide receivers in the top 9.
Surprising.
Just like we all thought, folks. I wrote down on my notes for the Cincinnati Bengals that they need a potential starter at wide receiver, someone to complement A.J. Green. Obviously, Tyler Boyd's more of a slot guy. They can use that. I like the idea of adding a receiver. I didn't think at number 9 was going to be the time to do that. I like a lot of the options in day 2, day 3 of this draft, early day 3, guys that can be those complementary number 2s. I think that they really overlooked a lot of different areas that could have improved their football team a whole lot better than John Ross, who's not even a sure thing because he's often injured.
Now, take off your guys' scouting, your NDT scouting hats. Put on your Marvin Lewis hats.
Yeah.
Why would he make this pick? What about John Ross is alluring to him?
Team speed.
Yeah.
It has to be. A.J. Green is not a premier speed receiver. The rest of the receivers that they have do not showcase a lot of great burning ability, vertical splash play. Tyler Boyd was a player that struggled with separation at Pittsburgh. Brandon LaFell does not consistently separate. So they have to be looking at this through the lens of we need team speed, we need splash plays, but it's going to have to come on quick hitting plays because otherwise I'm not confident in Andy Dalton's ability to push the ball consistently down the field.
Yeah, and you know what? This is going to help Andy Dalton a ton because John Ross has that rare speed. He's going to be able to separate quickly. So what he can do is give you a player that commands attention and maybe take a little bit of coverage off of A.J. Green. So this is a player, if I'm trying to spin this and make sense of this for them, there's few guys. There's not many people that can run with John Ross. And so when you have a player like an A.J. Green on the other side of the football, he's going to have a lot of one-on-one opportunities and nobody can run with him. So hopefully Andy Dalton can maximize that.
Not to interrupt, but big news just came in.
Yes.
You can interrupt on that. Yeah.
The Kansas City Chiefs moving up from number 27 all the way to number 10. They had to give up significant value there.
Significant.
What are they moving up for? Before I even get into that,
yes.
Joe, as a Buffalo Bills guy, how do you feel about the trade back?
Too, because you called this.
I called this. So this is something.
Yeah. Shot.
Remember, everyone was saying that Buffalo's trading up for Mitch Trubisky. Terry Pegula, the owner of the team, went down and spent time with a college kid, and they don't do that for players they're not interested in. I told you Buffalo had a lot of needs. You've got a first-year coach in Sean McDermott. You have a GM in Doug Whaley who's out of the way out. And Buffalo was just able to get an extra number 3 this year and a first-round pick next year. Buffalo Bills, 2 first-round picks in 2018 to move back. Now, they do risk not getting all the players that they could get here at number 10, but they move back to the Kansas City pick 27. So they move back pretty far, but they're able to get another first-round pick next year and get a number 3. It's a deep draft. There's going to be talent available at the end of the first round. That extra number 1 next year is huge, and another number 3 this year. Buffalo fans, this one is very excited.
Now, before Kyle, you jump in on that, is this something that the Bills could get away with because they just signed a head coach? He's not on the hot seat, so he doesn't need that top 10 pick to produce right away, and they can get value back for next year so they can get 2 really good players next year.
Yeah, I think their roster's still not in bad shape. They were a competitive team for majority of the year. This is just a question of feeling confident in the value, and this is one of those situations where just like we talked about when we were talking about the Titans hypothetically trading back, perhaps you're not totally confident in the value of the players. Maybe you had 5 or 6 top 10 values on your board, and those guys are all gone, and you're now here at 10. Okay, now it's time to reconsider. Maybe I can slide back into the 20s. Maybe I'm confident in the depth of the rest of the first-round class. Maximize that, add capital for next year. This is going to give them more flexibility. It's going to give them another middle-round pick with their third-round pick this year for another deep class. So that's going to give them a lot of options going forward.
Moving on from our swooning over the Bills, moving back, is the Chiefs moving up? It has to be for a quarterback. You're not going to give that kind of compensation unless you're going for the quarterback. But what quarterback are they coming up from? Is it Deshaun Watson?
It's got to be Deshaun Watson, right? And I love this fit. He gets to go to work with Andy Reid, who was able to work with Donovan McNabb. I think there might be some similarities there, and I like this a lot. I mean, if you're going to be aggressive, don't do it for anything other than a quarterback. Now, this is very aggressive, but counting on Deshaun Watson, that's a good player to bet on.
Yeah, and what he does well is timing. He was knocked in the pre-draft process for being a quote-unquote point guard, for being a guy that is quick to distribute the ball. This is an opportunity in Andy Reid. That's how they run their entire offense, is the quick-hitting stuff, the short routes, letting players win with run after catch. So if this is indeed what Kansas City has decided to do here, then it's going to help them transition from an aging Alex Smith to a player that has more athletic upside, has more as far as splash playability and creativeness, where Alex Smith can be a little too overprotective of the ball at times, where you saw Watson take the risks. So that's what I'm interested to see as this pick comes in right now.
All right, guys, the pick is in. With the 10th overall pick, the Kansas City Chiefs select wild card Patrick Mahomes.
So all the discussion
before the
just
draft
out the window.
Deshaun Watson said it would be a slap in the face if Trubisky went number 1. I don't want to know what he thinks Patrick Mahomes going ahead of him at number 10 is. Do you like this pick, Joe?
Patrick Mahomes has as much upside as any quarterback in this draft. He also comes with a lot of question marks. He came from this Texas Tech spread system where he was very much a touchdown to check down type passer. Now he's got a ton of arm strength, and he can throw the football anywhere, and he can improvise, and he can hit the deep zones with rare levels, right? You see those Brett Favre and those Ben Roethlisberger elements, but you also see a guy that's wildly inconsistently with his accuracy, and a player that's going to have a big transition ahead of him to get into an NFL offense.
That's exactly what is going to be the key for him, because he wins by holding the ball and letting receivers uncover. Now he's going to an offense that's predicated almost entirely on timing drops and meshing those with the routes and the route depths of the offense. So that transition is not going to be an easy one for Patrick Mahomes to make.
Now, is this the type of move that because you have Andy Reid, you can take a project-type guy in Mahomes?
I think it makes it easier for you to make that decision and bite the bullet and say, okay, this is somebody that we have Alex Smith for a couple more years on the roster, under control. So let's take advantage of that and get somebody that he can learn underneath and has higher end upside traits. But for me, I'm interested in the fact that they moved ahead of a number of other quarterback-hungry teams. Arizona Cardinals reportedly liked Patrick Mahomes, and he fit their system perfectly because he's a push-the-ball kind of guy. Cleveland Browns. So this aggression, we were right that this is move up and take your guy quarterback. It's just not the guy we would have guessed it was going to be.
Sure. And how about Cleveland? Sitting right now at number 12, and the possibility of Deshaun Watson to walk away from this draft with, the first round, with Myles Garrett and Deshaun Watson. You talk about a haul. I like that a ton. And obviously there's interest, right? Or maybe interest in Patrick Mahomes when you look at the Saints, when you look at the Cardinals, that Kansas City would make such an aggressive move. Now, one thing to factor in with this whole trade is Kansas City just gave up a lot to get Patrick Mahomes. There's going to be pressure that comes with that. The good news is I don't think he's got the pressure to play week 1, but he needs to become that the playmaker that everybody thinks he can become. He's got a lot of traits, but there's added pressure now that he comes with the caveat that the Chiefs gave up another number 1 pick to get him, and a 3 this year.
Now I'm looking over your guys' composite board. The first page goes 33 spots, and Patrick Mahomes isn't there. So according to you guys, this is a huge overpay. Yep. Is this something that could have a drastic effect on the Chiefs' future projection?
anytime you take a quarterback in the top 10, which is where he just went, it's going to influence the trajectory of your franchise. Now, the Chiefs do have a couple things going for them, and that this is a fairly deep roster. This is a competitive team. They play a very physical brand of defense. They like to get the ball out to their skill players quickly, so I think that will make life easier once Mahomes does come in. But the expectation here, you have to figure, is they're looking for an extra layer to their passing offense. Alex Smith has hit that ceiling and taken that offense as far as it can go. So now they're looking and saying, okay, maybe we're looking for somebody that can push and make explosive plays, because they have an athlete like Tyreek Hill there. They have Jeremy Maclin there. So you have players that can make splash plays. You just now need to get a quarterback in place that is A, willing to throw the ball in those situations, and B, has the physical ability to do so.
Okay, so we're 10 picks through the draft. Before we jump ahead to the Saints at number 11, what are some of your guys' thoughts on the first 10 picks? I mean, a lot of offensive players in a draft where everybody thought it was a defensive-heavy draft. Does that show that people are trying to just get the good offensive players when they can, maybe fall back for defense, second, third, fourth rounds? 7
offensive players in the top 10 picks.
Yeah, not something we expected, but I think that maybe plays to this draft. It's a deep defensive draft. If you want the premier offensive talent, you have to go get it. Now, we've mentioned, and we will continue to mention, that this is a quarterback-driven league. You have moves that were made to get quarterbacks, to get weapons for quarterbacks, and to get guys that get after quarterbacks. So that continues to prove to be an overarching theme that is part of the NFL. So when you're making your evaluations, you've got to consider those guys that impact quarterbacks, either getting after them or helping them.
Any other observations from you, Kyle?
Just interested in, we were so lauded at the pre-draft process on the depth of the corner class, right? This was an astoundingly deep cornerback class. It was something you heard quite a bit of. There's been some injuries, some off-the-field questions that have really impacted the top end of this cornerback class, and it's really manifested in the fact we have no corners in the top 10. When Joe and I look over our rankings, we really like a number of the corners here. We had 3 in the top 15. So this impact and seeing none of these players go is a shift that you're seeing the pre-draft process influence the picks now.
I'd like to toot my own horn a little bit. On the radio this morning, I said the thing that I thought was going to happen that would be a surprise was Marshawn Lattimore falling out of the top 10, a guy who is the consensus number 1 cornerback. Does that surprise you that he didn't find a slot in the top 10?
Top 5 talent. There's no question. This is a top 5 talent in terms of coverage ability, traits, athleticism. He's got repetitive soft tissue issues with his hamstrings.
Is that what it is?
It's got to be, because one thing you guys have heard me talk about this. Draft capital, using your resources in these players. This is your chance to improve your roster. You need guys that are going to be available. Your best ability is your availability. And if you're not reliable, I have to consider using my best resources to improve my team on players that I know are going to be there for me. Marshawn Lattimore has not been proven to be able to stay healthy.
Okay, now, looking ahead, the next 20 picks, there's a lot of really good value on the board.
Yes.
Guys like O.J. Howard, like we just said, Marshawn Lattimore, Jonathan Allen. Where do you see those kind of guys going? Do you see any of those guys slipping all the way maybe to the 20s, 25?
Well, the name I'm interested to see most is Hassan Reddick, the linebacker from Temple. This was a player I was expecting to be in play from 9 through 12, 13, 14, 15. So we've now entered that spot for him. Does the dropping of these other high-end caliber players on the defensive side of the football for teams like New Orleans and Cleveland, heaven forbid that they get to 12 and they decide they want one of these high-end defensive prospects over drafting a quarterback. Maybe they don't feel confident in Deshaun Watson. I don't know. We're about to find out here in 2 picks. Yeah. But does the dropping of those top-end defensive players result in dragging down some of these players? Do you see the domino effect start to take play here?
Sure. And the winners, the Saints. The Saints are sitting here on the clock. They can get the best cornerback in the draft. They can get the best linebacker in the draft. They can get, if they wanted to go with a John Allen, he's in play. And Malik Hooker's still in play. They got a pretty good safety situation, but some of the premier defensive talent is on the board, and the Saints have needed defense for as long as I've been watching football. So this is a really good chance for them to get one of the premier talents, and they got another pick at the end of the first round as well.
Now, do you think this is a Lattimore pick all day?
I don't think so. Because looking over their roster, they have Stephon Anthony, they have Craig Robertson, and Donnell Ellerbe as their three starting linebackers.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense for you to get along.
I had mocked them Hassan Reddick in my mock draft, and I really think you have to give strong consideration to that because he's a durable player, he's a versatile player, he doesn't have the availability concerns that Marshawn Lattimore has that Joe just got done going in depth on. So if they elect that P.J. Williams and Delvin Breaux are not the options for them there at the cornerback class, they can afford an upgrade on the defensive secondary. But are they going to go that route? We're about to find out.
Now, it seems you guys are targeting two guys. It seems like Lattimore and Reddick are the two guys. When you have two guys closely rated like that, how much does positional value put one ahead than the other? Joe?
I think it does come into play, but what you have here, to Kyle's point, is you have a player he's not been able to stay healthy. So while cornerback is probably more valuable than linebacker, you could see them going linebacker because you can get a player that is at a position that you can count on.
All right, and with that, number 11 pick is in. With the 11th overall pick, the New Orleans select Ohio State cornerback Marshawn Lattimore, like I said.
Excuse me.
Kyle, what do you think about that one?
I really like the addition for the ball skills that he brings. Joe just got done talking about this is a top 5 talent as far as the on-the-field ability. The ball skills are tremendous. Some of the football intelligence that he illustrated with how he defended multiple routes entering his area of the field as a one-year starter at the position was really impressive stuff.
Yeah, and look at the division, right? So you have a division here with the Saints that features Julio Jones. You've got Kelvin Benjamin. You need a player that can match up with those guys. Marshawn Lattimore, when he's healthy, is the type of guy that can take away a team's number 1 wide receiver. He's at the position that's more valuable. You were right about that, Mr. Roning. And the Saints walk away with the best cornerback in the draft and a real steal if he's healthy.
You know, when I'm around you guys, I don't get a lot of opportunities to toot my own horn. So I have to do it in the situations that I get.
Fair.
But now the Saints, they're coming back up. They're number 32. We're going to see them one more time if they don't trade out at the end of the. How does that fit into their overall philosophy? How much does this affect what they're going to do at number 32?
Well, this probably allows them to have the flexibility to go into it with a more best player available mentality, knowing that you have another first-round player on the board if you want to add to the linebackers. That seems to be when that second tier of linebackers becomes a reasonable gambit with players like Jared Davis from Florida and Tyus Bowser from Houston. Players like that can play off the ball and are athletic and can move well and would really upgrade what they have there. I think that's an addition that would be well served.
Yeah, no question. And then you think about some of the pass rushing talent. This is a position where there's a lot of depth. Kyle, you and I both like a ton of players. Excuse me. In that.
Ton of players.
Ton of players, Joe?
Go ahead.
Ton of players, Joe?
A lot of players that play the pass rusher position.
The edge, defensive end.
Yeah.
There's a lot of players. Derek Barnett here, right? Taco Charlton here. And it's another situation with premium positions, and you get back down into the 32s. I'm filling in blanks on what you were trying to say, so maybe I'm off base. But adding 2 premium positions on a defensive roster that does not play great defense, and they added with Sheldon Rankins there last year. So adding another player maybe is really going to give them a definitive brand that they need outside of just being a gunslinging passing offense.
Now, since the cat caught Joe's tongue, he had a great line that he said coming up to the draft about how the Saints have needed defense for, it seems like, the last 20 years.
Yeah, for sure.
Now, is this something that they need to hammer the rest of the draft, or should they let their board come to them and pick offense or defense, whoever the best available is?
Yeah, you've always got to do that. You've always got to go with the best player on the board of mentality, but I think that can be a defense, right? The point I was trying to make is that the pass rushing talent seems to be deep in this class, and something that I think could be there at 32. You know, me and you are both big Derek Rivers guys, and Carl Lawson, and those types of players. Tyus Bowser. Those types of players are going to be in play for New Orleans at the back half of the first round.
And they don't have a twitch rusher. You know, they very much have heavy-handed power rushers, a lot of interior success with guys like Rankins and
Cam Jordan.
Sure.
So getting somebody with some twitch would really help them as far as an around the edge type of player.
Even Todd McKinley, Charles Harris. I mean,
Yeah.
not necessarily players that we would value, but players that are in play and the NFL seems to like in this area.
How important is that for a defense to get a bookend when you already have a good defensive end like Cam Jordan, who gets a lot of attention? How important is it to get somebody on the other side of him that maybe can take a little bit of that pressure off? Is this something that maybe if the Saints do get a pass rusher that Cam Jordan will be maybe the guy who benefits most from it?
Yeah, I think so. I think complimentary rushers is a big deal. There's a lot of teams coming up that we're going to talk about complimentary pass rushers, and I think that's very important for you to have a guy that can win from the other side. If only one guy's getting pressure, you can easily flush that quarterback out and take advantage. You get a guy on the other side that can get after it, there's nowhere for that quarterback to go.
Okay, now, again, another trade. Cleveland Browns, we knew they're gonna be active. You know, they have the analytics style. They want to gather picks.
Yeah.
Now the Houston Texans are jumping up.
We know exactly.
We know
who
what
this
we're
is
gonna.
for.
We know what they're doing, but who is it for? Is it for Deshaun Watson? Do we know it's Deshaun Watson here?
Who else would be in play at 12? At 12.
We didn't
who
think
else would be
Mahomes was in play at 10.
But at least Mahomes is getting conversation
Yeah.
as being a potential top 15 player. You hear names like Nate Peterman and Davis Webb, Josh Dobbs. Those are not top 12 prospects. Deshaun Watson has to be the target here. And what I just got done laying out, since you're going to toot your own horn, I'm going to toot mine too. Heaven forbid the Browns play chicken and Watson falls to them at 12 and they decide they want to go a different direction.
Yeah, that's what's
Here we
confusing.
are.
Yeah, that's what is confusing to me, Kyle, is that Houston's trading up, we think, for Deshaun Watson. Why is Cleveland not turning in the card for Deshaun Watson? They need a quarterback. Both of these teams need a quarterback. I give Houston a lot of credit. I said in the pre-show, this is a team that needed to go get their guy. They needed passing production. They're a quarterback away. So I like what they're doing, but I just don't understand why Cleveland's not just hanging tight. They've got all the draft capital you would need. This is interesting. We don't know what happened, but if this is Deshaun Watson, I don't know why Cleveland didn't just draft him.
Is this pointing towards that Cleveland doesn't like any of the quarterbacks here? Or maybe even they're looking to trade for a guy like Kirk Cousins. I mean, what does this say about their evaluations of the players?
Well, Houston moving up, they gave up an extra 2018 first-round draft selection to make this move and fall back to 25. So what that tells me is sometimes it's a blessing and a curse to have a quarterback guru as a head coach, right? Because he's going to talk to guys like Davis Webb or Josh Dobbs, and he's going to walk away from those chalkboard meetings and he's going to say, that guy has what I want between the ears. He's an athletic guy. He's got a big arm. I can make the rest work. So that's what I'm expecting Cleveland to be betting on here as they make the move up. And the shocking thing now is Cleveland's moved back. They have another first-round pick next year. They have 2 first-round picks this year. They continue to be the team. I think 4 of the past 5 years, they've had 2 first-round draft selections.
Yeah, it's interesting. And Houston didn't have to give up anything else this year to get this pick done. That's interesting.
Yep.
All right, so guys, the pick is in. With the 12th overall pick, the Houston Texans select Clemson quarterback Deshaun Watson, surprising absolutely nobody.
Nobody.
Joe, what do you think about that?
Love it, right? This is a team that's a quarterback away. They went and got their guy. I like the structure around Deshaun Watson. Right away, you've got fellow Clemson player Nuke Hopkins on the outside. You've got Braxton Miller. You've got Will Fuller. You've got a running game with Lamar Miller and a defense. And so insert Deshaun Watson, who's led his team to the biggest stages that college football has to offer and was heroic and dominant in those stages. He's ready to lead the Houston Texans.
And Watson, from all reports, his meetings with the Texans went very well this offseason. So not surprising that if he makes it to this point and Cleveland's willing to deal, they're going to do that. And I really like the fit because the skill players that they have at Houston, I've said this on Chris Schubert's show a number of times, really mirror effectively the skill players that they had at Clemson. So that transition should be eased in some regard in that way.
Now, moving forward, looking at the Browns, could there be a reason they didn't like Watson because of their analytics background? I mean, at FanRag Sports, we have Ethan Young who did a great statistical progression on quarterback production, and Watson graded out in the lowest tier. A tier that the only quarterback that has been mildly successful is David Garrard. How does that affect not only your evaluation of Deshaun Watson, but the Cleveland Browns evaluation of Deshaun Watson?
So there's a bit of a misnomer and some confusion on what analytics is
Yep.
in general. So analytics is not, you can't do this because you're X size or X weight, or strictly looking at production, even though that's what it seemed like the Browns did last year. They took a ton of high production guys last year. Analytics can be any number of things that are collecting data and looking for trends and looking for success based off of those trends. So if the Browns were able to allocate some kind of adjusted production end result in analytics, which is what Ethan Young's model was based off of, then they made their decision. I think you had mentioned David Garrard. The other quarterback that was successful out of that model was Miami's Ryan Tannehill. That's a player that played wide receiver for 2 years in college. His college production as a quarterback is probably not going to be too good if he played wide receiver for 2 years.
Sure.
So it's an interesting layer to this, especially with Cleveland, because they've made their draft process so complex in that they look at all of this gross amounts of information, and we're really not sure what it is that they're looking at. And maybe in a couple of years, we'll really be able to dial in on that and narrow and find out, okay, this is some of the things that when we talk about the Browns analytics department, these are the things that they're keying on.
Yeah, and this is something Cleveland's going to have to live with. They've done what I think is the right thing in taking Myles Garrett over Mitch Trubisky, but now they passed on to Deshaun Watson. And so you've basically said we don't believe in any of these quarterbacks, something you mentioned already. And if Deshaun Watson is the player the Houston Texans thinks he is, Cleveland made a big mistake.
Do you think there's any quarterbacks that Cleveland could be eyeing at number 25, move back enough and be eyeing a Davis Webb, a Deshaun Kaiser, maybe even a Nathan Peterman?
I think Davis Webb's probably going to be somewhat in play here. It'll be interesting to see if that's the direction that they go. Everybody raves about Davis Webb as far as being intelligent, coach's son player, very high football IQ. The questions with him are in regards to applied on the field and how well he does in those situations. So it will be interesting to see with Cleveland now having 25 and 33, where are they going to go, and does this influence another team that was maybe picking in the late 20s or early 30s? Now you know all you have to do is get back up in front of 25 if you want a quarterback again here in the first round.
Now it's interesting. Again, more offensive players coming off the board in a defensive-heavy draft. A very interesting trend. Is this pick, number 13 with the Cardinals, where we see a defensive run? You
know, Arizona is a team that can go a number of directions. I think they wanted Corey Davis or one of these wide receivers to complement Larry Fitzgerald and tool up the offense to have the pieces around Carson Palmer for one more run. I think this may turn the attention to defense. We've talked about Hassan Reddick a few times. Maybe he's in play. There's cornerbacks in play because they need someone to truly play opposite of Patrick Peterson. This is an offensive line that doesn't get me very excited in Arizona. That was one of their biggest issues last year. They couldn't protect Carson Palmer, and you're playing musical chairs with Valdir and Humphreys as your tackles. They need competition, if not a starter. In their interior offensive line, where you have A.Q. Shipley and Cole Turner pegged to start, you know, Forrest Lamp is a possibility. So they have a number of areas they can go.
Would you go Lamp here? If this was you, if you were running the Cardinals, would you go Lamp?
So Forrest Lamp, for me, is a player that I rank in my top 15. He's my number 10 player on the board. So in terms of value, I'm okay with that. And I think that there is something to be said for, if you're going to gear up for another run with Carson Palmer, then you've got to have the players around him. And that doesn't mean, you know, a lot of times we think that means running backs and tight ends and wide receivers. Well, how about a blocker? How about a guy that can come in right away and be a dominating pass blocker and a guy that can create space for you in the run game? I think you get that in Forrest Lamp. So if they wanted to go offensive line, maybe it's a different player, not Forrest Lamp. It makes a ton of sense, but you've got to get this structure around Carson Palmer better.
Now, the Cowboys illustrated the way to build through your offensive line in the draft. You think the Cardinals could possibly use that as like a template that they could use to build around maybe their new quarterback? Not Carson Palmer, he's a little bit too old, but for their next quarterback, get him a good offensive line.
Well, the benefit's twofold, because Carson Palmer's 36, 37 years old. Minimizing the hits that he takes is going to be paramount to the success that they have in a closing window season if they're going to get back to being competitive. They went 7-8-1 this past year. So they're not far off, right? So it's a couple breaks here, a couple breaks there, keeping Carson Palmer upright and then piggybacking that off of, okay, now we're really setting the stage. We have a very strong offensive line to protect our future signal caller, whether that's this year, next year, a free agent, whenever that comes down the river. Being prepared for that is only going to make you and that young prospect or middle-aged veteran, whichever avenue they choose to go, better in the long run.
Now, Joe mentioned that getting somebody next to Patrick Peterson was vital for that defense. Is this a situation where the Gareon Conley situation, allegations, really hurt the Cardinals here? Because it's going to be hard to justify taking that kind of player this early.
Yeah, and we spoke briefly about the impact of injuries and off-the-field situations and the Gareon Conley situation and how that's impacted the top of the draft class, and now only seeing Marshawn Lattimore through the top 12 picks. So this was widely regarded. Sidney Jones was going to be a top 15, top 20 draft selection by a lot of accounts. Gareon Conley could have been the first cornerback taken off the board. So this domino effect, that we kind of teased here at 10, you're already seeing with Lattimore being the best player available, but that felt like it was more a fact of the Saints having the luxury of another first-round draft selection, and then teams going up in this quarterback-driven league seems to be the theme of the night, going up and getting another quarterback.
How about this angle? This is a team that lost Calais Campbell. This is a team that didn't get anything from Robert Nkemdiche. You've got John Allen on the board. I don't think it's out of the realm of possibilities for them to go defensive line here to retool a group that's had some players exit and really needs an infusion of youth and guys that they can count on.
I seem to remember somebody on Chris Schubert's show this morning making that suggestion and assertion that if John Allen, toot the horn, right? If he's in this situation, which here he is at 13, this is a player that had some questions regarding the shoulder situation and the arthritis in his shoulders. Now we know that has likely had some impact on where he is, or teams are just scared off by athletic testing, which should have minimal impact. So here we are, Arizona's on the clock, and from what I understand, John, the pick is in.
Kyle, you're right. The pick is in. And with the 13th overall selection, the Arizona Cardinals take Temple linebacker Haason Reddick. Kyle, this has to make you happy.
Yeah, Reddick is the first linebacker off the board, was one of my hot takes from the top of the show. We did some stuff on the FanRag Sports Twitter handle, Joe and I, and this was one we saw coming. Reuben Foster, the myriad of issues that he's experienced throughout the course of the draft process with the combine, the diluted sample, the questions regarding, some people had asserted that he likes the party scene at Alabama, whole bunch of questions regarding him. So Reddick is a safer prospect. He's versatile. He gives them athleticism that they don't have right now with Carlos Dansby currently as their middle linebacker. So I really like this fit for the Cardinals.
Yeah, speed on the second level, something that he gives them right away. He can chase into the boundary, he can cover, and then he can also rush the passer. That's something he did quite well at Temple. So I think he helps you in all facets and gets that defense rolling again, and another player that can impact quarterbacks.
Now, where do you see Haason Reddick going? Is he going to be an inside backer with the Cardinals, or is he going to play on that outside, rush the passer, drop back, kind of that multiple role?
Well, I think you're going to give him a chance to do a little bit of everything, but I have to start him at Mike. Yeah. He has explosive range. He can move. He can tackle. He's good in space. He finds his way through traffic well. I've talked at length throughout the pre-draft process, so you guys are probably sick and tired of hearing about it, but we're going to go through it again. The story that he is as a walk-on defensive back at Temple at 200 pounds and bulked himself up to approximately 240 to play defensive end and be a rush player for them, and then getting moved off the ball as a senior and at the Senior Bowl, all of those experiences build for a really fascinating player that can cover. He's used to covering because he did it as a defensive back. He can rush the passer because he did it for 3 years at Temple, and he can move on the second level and make reads because he's shown the ability to do it his senior year, and he was the standout at doing it at the Senior Bowl. So he is the top Senior Bowl player off the board.
Now, Joe, before you jump in, Kyle, you made an interesting comment that he is a safe pick. How can he be a safe pick when he's moving to a position that he did not play in college? Can you explain your thought process on that for people?
Yeah, that's a good question. So Reddick, when going back to the Senior Bowl process, one of the valuable things about the Senior Bowl, you're not necessarily looking at the game itself, but the opportunities to see guys in live pads action and see them do things and put in a situation not all of it is translatable, right? Your offensive line versus defensive line, your one-on-ones, that's very much skewed to defensive linemen as far as success. You've got a gross amount of space to work with. It's not a strong correlation, but Reddick on inside run plays. I was in the Exos room. They have a room set up where you can go in and watch the coach's tape from the day before of practice. And I'm sitting there, and there's NFL personnel at the table next to me watching Haason Reddick tape, and they're actively commenting about him doing cross-keys and reading the action of the fullback in the backfield when the entire line's stepping away. And he's reading that play properly based on the reads that he's making. That kind of football intelligence with the versatility that he has makes him a player that should not have a very difficult transition to the next level.
Yeah, I think it was a similar scene to this one right here, the three of us watching live Senior Bowl practices, and you couldn't help but notice how quick Haason Reddick was diagnosing plays, right? I mean, this guy got a quick jump.
First to the ball.
First to the ball, and he was quick to read. And it was obvious, and it's something that in that moment you said, no, there's no way I have any concerns about this guy playing off the ball. Then you go back to the tape. He's a player whose tape I watched after the Senior Bowl, and you've seen plenty of opportunities where he was playing on the edge, but he was working towards the boundary, playing in space, carrying wheel routes up the field. I mean, he's shown that he can do these things. So, yes, it's a projection, but that's part of what this is. That's what this NFL draft is about, finding players and projecting what they can become. And I think you have an extremely high upside player and a guy that I don't think there's any question has a ceiling that's going to make him at least a very, very productive second-level defender in the NFL.
Now, the Cardinals have lost a lot of talent on defense. That used to be one of the scariest defenses in the NFL. Mm-hmm. Is this one step closer to them regaining that type of ability to scare offenses?
Sure. Look at their second level and their pass rushers. They've infused talent there with Chandler Jones. They have Marcus Golden from Missouri, who's been an extremely productive pass rusher in his 3 years in the league. They have Deacon Buchanan, who was a safety at Washington State, who's now in there. Versatile player. It's what anytime you get a big safety that comes through the draft process right now, people want to make the comparison to Buchanan and want to say he's the next Deacon Buchanan. So, putting a guy like Reddick in there, that speed on the second level is very Pittsburgh Steelers-esque as far as just second level, just relentless speed, and you saw a very different defensive scheme in the Atlanta Falcons do extremely well this year with bringing in someone like Deion Jones, who necessarily wasn't a great tackler. And where I get excited about Reddick is he's a much better tackler than Deion Jones. Even though he's coming at a much higher cost at what Jones did, he has that same level of burst and speed and pursuit and rally skills.
Now, Joe, Kyle mentioned that the Cardinals are getting fast on defense. Is that a way to go against kind of the spread looks that are going in the offense, team speed as they need? Is that what this pick was because of?
I think it has something to do with it because you need guys that can cover ground. And Haason Reddick is one of those types of players. These NFL offenses are about presenting spacing problems, presenting size and athletic problems. And when you have players like Haason Reddick and some of the players that I'm sure we're going to get into tonight and tomorrow, these are your chess pieces. These are your counters. So there's a reaction to these defenses to be able to compete with these offenses, and players like Haason Reddick are able to do that.
Now, looking forward, Eagles at number 14, a very interesting team. They got their quarterback last year with Carson Wentz. What direction should they go here? Should they try to continue to improve that offense around Carson Wentz, or do they need to really bolster that defense?
They need a starter at cornerback. They've lost bodies there. They've done well to go out and sign names like Alshon Jeffrey and add size and add to that receiving core that does not have the ability, did not have the ability to win one-on-one on the boundary with great consistency. They were waiting to get something out of Nelson Aguilar. Seems he's better suited for the slot, but they currently have that bogged down with Jordan Matthews. They have a logjam of bodies on the boundary right now, even though Jeffrey's on a short-term deal. Yeah. But you need the starter at corner. Yeah. The question is, do they feel like with all the questions that are in place with the corners that were associated with the top of the draft, are any of these names now worthy of this 14th pick, or are they going to go another direction?
The cornerback that gets me excited is Marlon Humphrey out of Alabama. I think he'd fit really well with Jim Schwartz in terms of his ability to play in man, and he likes to mix in some zone as well. He gives you that tackling ability. He's the most physical cornerback in the draft. This was probably a really nice slot for Gareon Conley. No idea where teams are with that, but if there were none of his issues were in play, I think Gareon Conley would be a surefire fit here. But it's interesting to see if they go cornerback, and if so, which one.
All right. Well, it's time to find out who they pick, because the pick is in. With the 14th overall pick, the Philadelphia Eagles select defensive end Derek Barnett out of Tennessee. Very interesting pick that neither of you guys thought leading up to this. Kyle, is that a surprise for you?
A little bit. But when you look at the rushers that the Eagles have, someone like Trent Cole, who was there for so long, and Brandon Graham, who's there now, not the most explosive players. They're not the longest players. So this archetype doesn't necessarily take me by surprise a whole bunch. They're preparing long-term here. They have a player in Fletcher Cox who's one of the most dominant interior defensive linemen, and getting bodies around him that are really going to accentuate and get one-on-one reps, not just for Cox, but also for Barnett, is going to make this a really nice complementary rusher situation in Philadelphia.
Yeah, scheme fit here is really nice. I think he projects beautifully to the 4-3 system that Jim Schwartz likes to run. He'll be able to get out wide, work those angles. He's a guy that does very well to reduce his surface area and bend that edge track. So I think this is a good opportunity for him to fit into that defense. Maybe not what we were thinking. I like the value. This is about where I feel comfortable taking Derek Barnett, and certainly a good scheme fit.
Now, the Eagles, they're in the same division as the Dallas Cowboys, a team with the best offensive line in football. Is this their way to combat that? I mean, they got Fletcher Cox. They got Brandon Graham. Yeah. Now they have Derek Barnett. Do you see this as a reason why they would do that?
Absolutely, because look at what Dallas does well. They're, for as good as their offensive line is, they're a run-first team, and they play heavy running the ball between the tackles. So somebody like Barnett is much better as a run defender, in my opinion, than he is as a pass rusher at the next level. He was an extremely productive pass rusher, but the traits that he has and what he is going to be able to do with his physical skill set lends itself much more friendly to being setting the edge, playing at the line of scrimmage, resetting the line of scrimmage, and making sure you're sustaining your gap integrity as compared to winning with twitch and getting penetration.
Now, Joe, you talked about Derek Barnett's ability to bend the edge and how that is a very enticing trait that he has. But is there anything you can do that he can do to accentuate that even more in the NFL? Does he need to work on his hands more? Does he need to convert speed to power more?
Yeah, I think what it comes down to for Derek Barnett to take the next step in his game is to expand his pass rush repertoire. This is a guy he comes out low, he anticipates the snap well, and he's able to reduce his surface area and bend the edge, but I don't see a whole lot else. If this is a guy that can develop some hand technique to establish that separation from the offensive tackle, work some more inside counters, do more to soften the edge and win with power, he's going to become more of a complete player. And that's okay. I don't want maxed out football players, right? So he has a way that he wins, and it works for him, but he's a player that can get even better. And a guy that dominated the SEC. I mean, he broke Reggie White's all-time career record for sacks at the university. That's impressive. Nobody can block him in the SEC. So you've got a really exciting upside player that can develop if he can do the things we just talked about.
Now, I got a question for both of you guys. As a person who likes to evaluate edge rushers year-round like I do, how do you value a guy like Derek Barnett who wins a lot in college by timing the snap? In college it's very easy to time the snap when the quarterbacks are looking to the sideline for their plays, play after play. Now Barnett's going to be going against guys who will vary up the snap count. They'll try to draw him off sides. They're not going to give him the same tendencies over and over and over that he can count on to jump that snap. Is that something you worry about in the NFL, or does he have the athleticism to make up for it?
Of course, and that was kind of what I was trying to allude to in my last statement, where you can win with snap anticipation. He's not a twitch player. He is a snap anticipation player. His first step is probably above average, but it's not good, and it's definitely not great. Yeah. So the ability to key up the snap counts for him is why he was able to win with so frequently with that diminished surface area and ducking the inside shoulder and shrugging off contact that way. If you don't counter that with inside counter moves and secondary moves, if you're conceding a hand fit on your chest or your shoulders, that's where you're going to get bogged down. So I'm totally on page with Joe. You have to now build off this foundation of having a go-to trait and build yourself some second traits that you're going into your reps knowing I'm going to try and key up the snap. But if I don't get there, this is what I know this tackle will do, and this is how I'm planning on countering it against it.
Yeah, so I think you would prefer to have a guy that just has that explosive get-off, that it doesn't matter when the ball is snapped. He's coming out with leverage and speed out of his stance. And so that's not something you get, and he does counter that effectively by anticipating the snaps. It's something that's going to be mitigated at the next level, just like all the traits, right? Everybody's better in the NFL. So it's something where, I don't know how much better he can get there, but developing the secondary pass rush moves is how he'll overcome.
Now, I found this is an interesting pick because it pointed to what the Eagles value in pass rushers. Maybe they're not looking for that guy who has that twitchy upfield burst, but they're looking for that guy who has that defining trait that can win immediately.
Well, it's interesting because I knew the former regime that was there, they were very interested in certain size measurements, certain arm length measurements, and certain athletic measurements. And if you did not have those, they did not typically associate with a first-round selection. So this is a move away from that. And you've seen that the past couple of years now with the players that they've really worked into the starting lineup, whether it's Connor Barwin or who since departed, or Brandon Graham as well.
All right, we talked enough about the Eagles now. Now let's move ahead to the Colts, and their pick is in. With the 15th overall pick, the Indianapolis Colts select safety Malik Hooker. His fall ends here. How do you like that pick, Joe?
Well, I think based on the way things were perceived going in, this is somebody that fell and a player that Indianapolis is capitalizing on, not necessarily a player that either Kyle or myself are surprised to see fall because of some of his shortfalls. Now, safety is a major need for Indianapolis, and what they're able to do here in Malik Hooker is get that deep zone defender that can cover ground, that can break on the football, and allow them to be more aggressive with what happens in front of him. So this is a player that I think has a big impact on this defense. He's got work to do. He's got to be better coming forward and being more consistently physical, but I think he does a lot for this scheme that needs help.
Yeah, let's talk about the upgrade that they now have. They took TJ Green in the second round last year, but their starting free safety right now is Clayton Gaithers of UCF.
Yeah.
So the opportunity to get a true ball hawk here is really going to allow that secondary to get more aggressive, play more loose, knowing you have somebody that can cover you on the back end.
Now the Colts, they had a regime change at general manager. Does this show a shift in philosophy going for a guy like Malik Hooker, or is this kind of just too good of a value to pass up?
I think it's probably a combination of both. For both myself and Joe, I know we both had Hooker inside of our top 32 players, but he was somebody, for me, he was 31st. Joe, for you, I believe he's 28th or 29th.
Yeah.
So it's earlier than us in a vacuum associating this draft class would have pegged someone like Hooker. But again, it's the ball skills that are there, the opportunity to make splash plays. Indianapolis does not play great defense. So you're seeing the theme. A lot of teams, we have a nice run here of defensive players going off the board for the past 5 picks. These are teams that desperately need upgrades and playmaking ability and turnovers and creating turnovers.
Yeah, for sure. And I guess if I wanted to be critical of the pick, is that I don't necessarily think you build defenses by building your safety position. I think it's an important position. But, was improving the front 7 something that was a missed opportunity here? Maybe, maybe not based on the players that are available, but does this go back to the position value, part of the reason Malik Hooker fell, and that maybe there was other positions they could have improved?
Well, I'm going to piggyback and pivot off of that. What front 7 position players right now outside of Reuben Foster, who has some questions regarding his resume, would have been worthy of a draft selection here in the top 15? A lot of the names that you've typically associated with the top of the draft class as defensive prospects are gone.
Yeah.
So this may be a blend of understanding we need to get better on the defensive side of the ball. We're going to take a guy with a high impact ability, and we're going to take the best available prospect that's a little cleaner than what Foster is off the field.
Sure, and the player in my mind was John Allen. I think that would be a player that that I would have been comfortable playing there, and just kind of giving another thought process. Hey, my personal team building philosophy is I recognize the value of safeties, but I also think that if you wanted to really build a defense, and something that the Colts need to do, another team that has historically struggles on defense, maybe the ulterior, maybe the better move would be to go with the defensive line. I do like what he's going to be able to do, Malik Hooker that is, in terms of playing in those deep zones and allowing things to be more aggressive in front of him. I think that's really where his impact is.
Is there a more Baltimore Ravens pick than John Allen right here?
You aren't kidding, Cal. That's who's up, right?
Backing off of that, Alabama, each player from Alabama, all their top guys, Reuben Foster, Jonathan Allen, O.J. Howard, are seeing a little bit of slip.
Yeah.
Is that because of the things that you think about Alabama? You know, they work hard in practice. Their guys come into the NFL, they have their nicks, they have their pains. Is this an overarching thing, or is it just each individual case?
You would like to think you would tackle each one of these cases on an individual basis, but at the same time, there is a stigma around Alabama prospects where they're reaching the NFL level and they're largely maxed out, and a lot of them have medical issues. So that's an interesting dynamic to continue to watch as we have these highly regarded players from the media side of things. How does the NFL approach these players? We're starting to see some apprehension as far as having early draft selections. We're one pick away from the top half of the first round with no Alabama players taken, and we were talking about 5 or 6 potential first-round picks.
Yeah, and I still like those players.
Yes.
So, if that's a real concern, I think it's something that continues to come up. But I think O.J. Howard's the safest player in the draft. John Allen, watched the last 2 years of tape. I mean, he's a bull. He doesn't get moved. He makes plays. Reuben Foster is my number 2 player in the class. Obviously, some of the things that don't have anything to do with on-field performance are pushing him down. There is some talented Alabama players to be had, and maybe some of these teams here in the back half of the first round will be the beneficiaries of that.
Now, Kyle, you mentioned Jonathan Allen as a great target for the Ravens here, and it makes sense because Timmy Jernigan's gone.
Yes.
Jonathan Allen would be able to step in and immediately replace him. But is the reason why he's available now is that he's not that electric kind of athlete?
Sure, but at the same time, this is what Baltimore always does. Baltimore has historically drafted very well, and it's because they let other teams, I don't want to say overthink, but essentially overthink some of these players, and they'll maximize the value of their draft selections because teams are trying to get more splash guys. And John Allen is a splash guy. You don't have to look any further than that sack where he jumped literally horizontal to the ground over top of another human being to make a finished play. Looking at their depth chart, they have Willie Henry and Brent Urban as their starting defensive ends right now.
Yep.
So I know they need help on the boundary on both offense and defense. I know they need help at wide receiver. They need help at corner. But this just really lines up like it would be an Alabama and Baltimore match, and see that pick happen right here.
We've got a wild card, and I know I've said this a couple times. Another team with interior offensive line issues. Is this a Forrest Lamp spot? I'm not sure, but if we're thinking outside of the John Allen possibilities, I think he's worth mentioning.
Now, Ozzie Newsome, he's a guy who always goes best player on the board. He's one of the few GMs that really adheres to the BPA strategy. You think Jonathan Allen's the best player available, but could it be a guy like Reuben Foster? Could it be O.J. Howard?
Well, Foster's higher on my personal draft board than what Allen is, but if I'm considering the overall resumes of both players, if I'm considering the scheme fits for Baltimore, they're certainly both fits, and I'm sure some Baltimore fans that are watching this are probably throwing a fit because they've been burned by Alabama players before, whether that was Courtney Upshaw or Terrence Cody. There's a long lineage here of Alabama players that did not pan out for Baltimore. But whether it's Foster or John Allen, Baltimore is just, they've always been known, especially in the middle rounds, but this is middle of the first round, an opportunity to maximize and optimize the value of their draft selection.
Now, before we get into their pick, where do the Ravens fall right now? Are they a team that can really challenge for a playoff Super Bowl type berth, or are they a few pieces away from getting to that point?
Yeah, I think they're more of a few pieces away. They've got the Pittsburgh Steelers staring at them in their face in that division. I think they're the class of it, and I think they need a lot of help in terms of improving the secondary, on the edge, interior offensive line. Who's Joe Flacco throwing the football to? This is a team with a lot of needs.
All right, so the pick is in. With the 16th overall pick, the Baltimore Ravens select another Alabama Crimson Tide member, Marvin Humphrey, cornerback. Joe, this is your guy. This is the guy you've trumpeted all pre-draft. How do you feel about this?
Yeah, Marlon Humphrey, number 9 player on my board. If that gives you any idea of how much I like him, he is the most physical and aggressive cornerback in this class. From what he can do in terms of jamming receivers at the line of scrimmage, being physical in the contact window, tackling. I mean, this guy is going to be a dominant D-gap defender. So you get a physical player that has a lot of upside. He's athletic. He's got some length to him. He's only 20 years old. I think he can thrive in zone coverage where he can break on the football and work into throwing lanes, but also give you some man ability. He needs some technique work, a little bit staying in phase when the ball's in the air. But I think this is a cornerback who I rated just below Marshawn Lattimore. So I think this is a great pick.
Yeah, Humphrey is one of the most explosive downhill fillers in this class as a secondary player. He tackles better than most of the safeties do. He's got nice ball skills. He's creative and effective with the ball in his hands. He was a big playmaker for them this year at Alabama. So as Joe mentioned, there's some technical issues that need to be polished up in some off-man situations, but really like what he can be and develop into for the Ravens.
Now, the Ravens are in the same division as probably the best wide receiver in the NFL, Antonio Brown.
Probably?
Is.
Julio Jones says what's up.
But how does Marlon Humphrey help them cover Antonio Brown? Is he a guy that matches up well with that kind of receiver? Or is this kind of just, he's a great player and we want him for our team?
Well, I think it's value. So for me, it's value. You know, this is a player that I said I rated in the top 10 of this class. And I'm not going to sit here and say that me and Ozzie Newsome are seeing eye to eye, but we're seeing eye to eye. He thought this is the best player on the board. And that's something you can count on with Baltimore. They are always going to trust their board and go with the best player on it. And so we talked about all the different angles that they can go. Obviously, for them, Marlon Humphrey was the best player, and obviously he does help you match up against some of the great receivers in that division. You know, he can. You know, I'm not going to sit here and say he can cover Antonio Brown. I think that's a tall order for anybody, but he certainly gives you a chance.
Yeah, and Humphrey, for me, was much better in deep third zone coverage. Which I think he complements well with Jimmy Smith on the other side.
Sure.
A lot of their other corners, whether it's Brandon Carr or Tavon Young, who was a draft selection out of Temple last year, those guys are a little smaller, leaner, traditionally associated as interior slot type defenders, the quick-footed guys. I'm not reading this as we have to shut down Antonio Brown. I'm reading this more as this is a really nice marriage of scheme fit and youth in the secondary for a team that needs it more than anything else.
Now, we talked at the start of the show about how important it is to get after the passer now. Are you a little bit surprised that Ravens, a team with an aging Terrell Suggs, they just got rid of Elvis Dumervil? Are you kind of surprised that they didn't go pass rusher here?
I just don't know that the pass rush value was there. This was a chance where the cornerback class is deep, but the premier talent has really taken a hit. Sidney Jones, the Achilles tear, that pushes him down. The Gareon Conley situation, that is what it is. Well, now you're talking about Marlon Humphrey as the second best corner in this class behind Marshawn Lattimore. And I think it was a chance to capitalize on the dwindling talent that's truly available at corner.
Now, we're taking the trip, this small little trip from Baltimore right over to Washington, D.C.
Right down the Beltway.
Now, Kyle, I see you've got your mock draft open.
Yeah.
Reuben Foster is still on the board. This could be a thing that you call. Why did you see this as a great fit with Reuben Foster?
Well, the Redskins last year took Sua Cravens out of USC in the second round, and they played him at middle linebacker, and he had great success there, and it's since been announced that they're moving Sua Cravens permanently to a safety spot. So that opens up a position on the inside. They have some nice pass rushers there in Washington, but they need to fill that void. They were pressed into playing Sua Cravens at a position that was not optimal for him, and he did very well and showed very well as far as playing physical and playing well inside the box, but that lends itself very well to him being a strong safety in the long term. So now you have the opportunity to add someone like Reuben Foster, and if there is a team that is willing to overlook some questionable things, Washington is one of those teams that I would typically associate with a team that's willing to overlook some of the question marks and say, this is a high-end player, this is a position of need for us, let's go ahead and check the box. We're willing to take the risk because there's some risk involved with every draft selection, and it's just Foster has some more question marks and unchecked boxes versus some others as far as his off-the-field resume.
Speaking of risks, how about a running back? You have very underwhelming options right now on this depth chart to carry the football. You've got a passing offense that was among the top 5 in the NFL last year that just lost, the likes of Deshaun Jackson and Pierre Garçon. Well, how about getting the running back situation right so that you can be more complementary with the passing game and have a bell cow? Are they willing to pull the trigger on a Dalvin Cook? Are they willing to pull the trigger on a Joe Mixon? I think that's a conversation worth having with this point in the draft.
Well, and it's interesting because they've made a lot of investments in the offensive side
Sure.
of the ball so far. They just re-signed Morgan Moses.
Yep.
I believe they made him the second highest paid right tackle
Yes.
in the league
Yes.
as of this afternoon. They signed Terrell Pryor. They have Josh Doxson, last year's first-round pick, coming back from an injury. Jamison Crowder was the most productive receiver they've had since he got on the roster there as far as splash plays and consistency out of the slot. They still have Kirk Cousins under contract. They have a lot in place on offense. I would turn around and counter because I didn't even talk about Jordan Reed. They have Matt Jones as a third-round pick who they traded up for 2 years ago. They have players there that they made a priority for. So what I'm interested in is filling out the rest of that defense. They signed Zach Brown on a short-term deal. Get another second-level linebacker there.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think linebacker is the way to go, but worth mentioning, if the running back was in play, there's some options. They're a risk-taking team. This could be it. I think Foster gives them a top 5 player, if everything's okay, that could really be the face of that defense. So this is going to be an interesting choice here for Washington.
How much does the whole Scott McLuhan situation change your thought process about the Redskins, what they're going to do? Because McLuhan had a very in-type, he had an archetype that he liked. He liked good football players. Now he's not there. Is that going to change? Is their philosophy going to change more to Bruce Allen's, what he likes in players?
Yeah, I would imagine some of yes and no, but McLuhan did set the board before he left. And they said they made minimal changes to the draft board after that change was made at the end of February. So I don't necessarily read this as something that's going to directly impact what decisions they make right now going forward.
Yeah, it's interesting. I think that point makes them more likely to go after a Reuben Foster. They need a splash. They need a spark on defense. They had some very disappointing losses late in the season, and it's because I don't think their defense had an identity. And I think Foster can really help establish that, so we'll see.
Is this a situation like the Eagles where they went defensive front to try to maybe combat the division-leading Dallas Cowboys? Could the Redskins do something similar here? Jonathan Allen's on the board. There's a couple pass rushers still on the board. Where do you see them going?
Sure. They have needs along the interior defensive line, right? Ziggy Hood is there, but outside of that, Stacey McGee and Terrell McClain they're currently slotted as their defensive ends. So there's some questions there. There's some concerns there. I'm not necessarily outruling John Allen. I think John Allen was a reference that I had made as the floor for John Allen in the draft process if he found himself dropping, and I believe that pick is in.
Yeah, the pick is in. With the 17th overall pick, the Washington Redskins select Jonathan Allen. Kyle, right about Jonathan Allen's floor.
Right
How
on
does
the
that
buzzer.
feel?
Yeah,
How does it feel?
That feels nice. That's luck of the draw, right? So I did not get it right in my mock draft, but it was something that I had discussed as far as a theory and an option. So really like that we just got done talking about the defensive ends that they have on the roster. Stacey McGee and Terrell McClain. They have really nice exterior guys with Ryan Kerrigan and Brian Orakpo as their stand-up rushers. And now they have somebody on the inside that, again, complementary rushers. It's something Joe talked about at the very beginning of the show. Getting that concept underway, really like this fit for Washington and John Allen.
Yeah, John Allen's a stout football player. So Kyle spoke a lot about his ability to rush the passer. I think he can stop the run. This is a guy who's has a very strong anchor. He can sink his hips, he can extend his arms, and he can really control blocks and shed and find the football. So this is a guy that lives in backfields. He dominated the SEC, and I think this is great value for Washington right here with pick 17.
Now, the Redskins are a team, they lost Chris Baker this offseason. He's been a vital part of their defensive line rotation for many years. Is Jonathan Allen just going to step in and replace Baker right away?
You would have to think. That would be my expectation for a player. We got done talking about Alabama players as high floor players. They come into the league and they are typically very polished. They're very close to their ceiling as players. I don't necessarily see a lot of growth potential for Jonathan Allen, but that's why he was so good at the college level. So that's a player that I am expecting to come in and be a starting lineup player right off the bat.
Yeah, I think he's ready. I think this is different than a lot of the players we've talked about where they need work, expectations might need to be low to start. I think Fisk is a year one projection player that can come in and be a big part of that defensive line right now. I mean, this is a guy who really controlled blockers in the SEC, who's arguably the best competition in college football. He didn't have any problems holding his ground against those guys, winning with hand technique and finishing plays, and I think he'll be able to do it at the NFL.
Now it's interesting. He goes from the SEC, the best competition in college. He's going to go right into the NFL, and he's going to be lining up against the Cowboys 2 times per year, the best offensive line. Is he prepared to be able to handle the Zach Martins of the world, the Tyron Smiths of the world?
John, you keep talking about the Cowboys. You strike me as maybe a little bit of a Dallas Cowboys fan.
Me? No.
No, it is the tallest order in football as a defensive lineman is to go against that Dallas Cowboys because every single position across the front, they just let Ronald Leary walk out the door, and Denver could not sign him fast enough as far as that was their 6th offensive lineman that people were dying to sign. So across the board, Frederick, Martin, Tyron Smith, really impressive overall group that they have in Dallas. I think he will be a player that holds his own. He'll probably experience some growing pains the first year. He'll probably get schooled by some crafty veterans that have been at it for a while. But at the same time, technically sound and very gap-conscious power player that has some inside lateral quickness, I expect he'll be just fine.
Now, Joe, Kyle mentioned about how he's not a really high ceiling player. What do you think Jonathan Allen's ceiling is? Is he a multiple-time Pro Bowler? Is he an All-Pro potentially? Or is he just a guy who's going to be a really good player, maybe 1 or 2 Pro Bowls throughout his career?
I think he's probably that type of player where he is going to be an excellent starter for a long time. He's going to be an anchor. He's going to be a big part of your rotation as a starter. But he's not the athlete you really like. For his size and his athletic ability, they don't mesh well. They don't lend itself to thinking this is going to be a big-time playmaker that's going to win with quickness. Now, we know he wins with power, but does he have the quickness side of things to really be a guy who racks up splash plays that lead to those Pro Bowl appearances?
Now, we talked about Alabama not having anybody in the first 15 picks. We got 2 straight Alabama players here. Do you see O.J. Howard and Reuben Foster coming off the board quickly? I mean, I know we keep hammering it, but it's just surprises to me that a guy like, especially O.J. Howard, a guy who's that clean, he's falling this far. Is that just because his position, tight end, is not valued very high?
Let's talk about who's on the board right now. The Tennessee Titans. This was a player that some people had kicked around as potentially being a landing spot if they wanted to really open up the passing offense. So it'll be interesting to see where he ends up going. I think he's starting to reach teams like the Miami Dolphins and the New York Giants and the Oakland Raiders. All of those teams could afford to bring in a stud tight end. So I don't think O.J. Howard's going to have to wait all that much longer.
Now, Kyle, you mentioned the Titans are on the clock. Well, the Titans just made their pick. And with the 18th overall pick, the Tennessee Titans select USC cornerback / return man / gadget offensive player Adoree Jackson. Adoree Jackson. Joe, we didn't, in the mocks leading up to this, we didn't see Adoree Jackson going this high. Are you a little bit surprised?
I'm a little surprised that he went this high. I thought he was more of an end of the first round option for a team like Dallas or New Orleans. But one thing we knew going into this draft is that Tennessee needed to get help in terms of their offensive playmakers and then in the secondary. Now, Adoree Jackson is their secondary help. He's not necessarily your big physical outside cornerback, but he has really quick feet. He's among the best click and close corners in this class. He's got big time ball skills, and then he does all the other stuff that you mentioned in terms of being a dynamic returner and offense in a pinch. He's a cornerback. Let's not detract from that. That's what he is. But he's more of a guy that I think can play inside and outside, maybe a little high, but he's certainly an exciting player with upside.
Yeah, and speaking of the return impact, Eric Weems is currently their return player.
Yeah.
So massive upgrade in that regard. Special teams highly underrated as a phase of the defense. And then they have LaShawn Sims as a starting corner.
Yeah.
So we've talked vastly throughout the draft process. Tennessee getting better on the boundary. They did that with both Corey Davis and now Adoree Jackson.
Now, you mentioned that he is a defensive player. He's going to make his hay as a cornerback. But should the Titans think about using Adoree, maybe scheming him 1, 2, 3, 4 touches a game?
Well, Mike Mularkey is a coach that I'm pretty familiar with. And one thing that I will give him credit for is a lot of creativity on offense. And so I think if he wanted to tap into that, you have a player in Adoree Jackson that can do that. Now let's not get away from it. This is a cornerback. He's going to play cornerback, and he helps them in that area. But when you think about Mike Mularkey, who's been creative, go back to his days as Buffalo's head coach. I mean, he did things that really challenge things that you've never seen before in football and offense, and maybe a guy like Adoree Jackson lends itself to those possibilities.
Now, Kyle, you're giving me a weird look.
Yeah.
You're not a fan. Not a fan of using Adoree Jackson on offense.
These split-level guys like Adoree Jackson and Jabril Peppers, these guys that played both ways, let them have the opportunity to really develop themselves at their premium position and their primary position. Adoree Jackson is a player that, as far as his footwork, his foot speed is tremendous. His transitions and his technique at the line of scrimmage, it needs improvement. So before we start talking about putting him in on offense and detracting from the opportunity for him to continue to get repetitions, even in practice, I want him practicing his footwork nonstop because it needs to get better. His ceiling is tremendous. He was one of the most exciting players. Even on defense, his ball skills were outstanding. He had one of the most impressive sideline interceptions I've seen in a long time as far as the body control, the ball skills, and the explosiveness. So I think you would be doing him a disservice to scheme him touches on offense before he's ready for it.
Now, I think an interesting part about Adoree Jackson is he hasn't had an offseason where he's been able to devote to football because he's been doing track and field so much since he got to USC. Do you think that's going to be a huge help to his developmental process, Joe?
Of course. You have a guy who's football 100% of the time. Kyle's no fun. What was that?
That's the second time in 6 months you've told me I'm no fun with my takes on football.
I just don't know that having a guy run occasionally a route or take an end around or catch a quick football is all that much of a detriment to his. Well, I think it's overstated, Krabs.
That's fine. And we've done pretty well if we've gotten through 18 picks before you and I have butted heads on something. So
owning's between us. So.
Yeah, he's separating, keeping us sane here.
All right. The Tampa Bay Buccaneers pick is in. And with the 19th overall pick, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers select Alabama tight end O.J. Howard. His fall finally stops. Joe, is this a good fit?
This is a great fit. And this is a situation where I had been pegging them to take David Njoku because O.J. Howard was always off the board. And now he falls and they get the best tight end in the class. O.J. Howard's probably the safest player in this class. I just don't foresee a scenario where he's not one of the best 3 or 5 tight ends in the NFL. Right off the bat, you have a dominant run blocker, a guy that's going to create space and instantly make your offense better because of the space he's going to create for his running backs and for his receivers with the ball. Then he's a big-time receiving threat in terms of his upside. He hasn't had a ton of production at Alabama, but we saw what he can do in the 2 national championship games against Clemson where they couldn't guard him. And that's going to be hard. He's a tough assignment for these NFL secondaries where he has rare size and rare athleticism that, corner or safeties and linebackers are just going to have a tough time matching up with this guy. This is a home run pick for me.
You know what this is a replacement for? Vincent Jackson leaving. They had big size in their receiving targets with Vincent Jackson and Mike Evans.
Yep.
So now Vincent Jackson is out. You're just replacing a guy on the outside with a guy on the inside. They love Jameis. Capitalizes on those catch radius guys frequently. And O.J. Howard is a very large target in the middle of the field. Some people had made a big fuss about Cameron Brate stepping out and being a high-production tight end player, but there's no question this is an upgrade as far as what O.J. Howard can be.
Now, continuing on the Brate point, is this maybe signaling a turn to more 12 personnel from the Buccaneers? They're a team that's liked to play a lot of 3 wide receiver sets before. But now it looks like their personnel could fit the 12 personnel better. You got tight ends, you got O.J. Howard and Cameron Brate, and then on the outside you got Deshaun Jackson and Mike Evans.
Yeah, a lot of great complementary pieces. You have a backfield in Martin and Sims that complement each other well. You have a receiving duo in Mike Evans and Deshaun Jackson that complement each other very well. Now you have a Cameron Brate, O.J. Howard situation where they complement each other very well. So you give a lot of versatility to your scheme. You can certainly do more 2 tight end things, and this is a great move. We talked about it with Marcus Mariota, that he deserved to be surrounded. And they made an investment by using the 5th pick on Corey Davis. Now back in the draft where Mariota went 1-2, Winston gets help in the form of O.J. Howard.
Kyle, we've seen a huge influence of tight ends, those move tight ends, the ones that are kind of like just basically a big slot receiver, a big wide receiver. How important is it that O.J. Howard has that ability to be that inline tight end?
Sure. So this really can't be understated as far as I'm concerned. A 3-down inline tight end with the athletic ability that O.J. Howard has the ability to influence your offense in more ways than almost any other non-quarterback on the field. And the reason why is because this is a player that can block inline, set the edge in your running game, can get out on the second level and block linebackers, can get flexed out in space and block defensive backs and do it effectively. He can get up the seam. He can run away from linebackers. He can overpower secondary players. There's so many ways in which if he translates the way everybody is expecting him to, he is going to be a huge piece for the Tampa Bay Buccaneers offense going forward.
Joe, you were mentioning how this is a Jameis Winston pick. This is something that is going to help him improve. Where does this put their offense among the NFL?
Certainly one of the most potent, right? It's got to all come together. It has to click. But I think there's a lot of tough assignments for defenses. You can't double cover everyone, and you've got a big-time speed threat in DeSean Jackson. You've got a guy in Mike Evans who just is a physical nightmare for defenses. One cornerback really is going to have a hard time shutting him down. Okay, well now you have O.J. Howard, who's a size speed freak, and he's going to be able to find space. He's going to be able to run away from defenders, and Jameis Winston just now has all kinds of options to distribute the football to, and it's going to be one of the tougher assignments for NFL defenses to compete with.
Yeah, I really don't envy defensive coordinators trying to figure out how you're going to handle that size.
No.
Especially if you put them on the same side of the field. Who has personnel that can match up with 6'5" in two spots?
It's interesting because it's a dynamic that Tampa Bay tried to create with Vincent Jackson, Austin Seferian-Jenkins, and Mike Evans. Injuries really prohibited that from materializing. Well, here's the next phase of players that can do that.
Okay, now moving forward to the Denver Broncos. They've been attached to offensive tackles throughout the process, and it makes sense. In the AFC West, that is the best pass rushing division. I mean, you got Oakland Raiders, you got Khalil Mack, Bruce Irvin. Over with the Chiefs, you got Justin Houston, Tamba Hali, and Dee Ford. And then you move over the Chargers, they got Melvin Ingram and Joey Bosa. So is it offensive tackle or bust here for the Broncos?
Who's the name I have down here?
Bowles.
Garrett Bowles.
Mr. Bowles.
Garrett Bowles. Was in my mock draft. I'm so confident I wrote it down on my own personal tally of the picks as they're happening.
I feel like that's a mistake.
Garrett Bowles.
Call a shot.
They currently have Menelik Watson and Donald Stevenson as their bookend tackles.
That's bad.
That's not going to cut it in the AFC West.
No, it's not, and especially with potentially a first-time, full-time starting quarterback in Paxton Lynch there.
Yeah.
You have to be able to do better than that. And they went out and they signed Ronald Leary. They like Garcia quite a bit, and they like Max Paradis, the center, as well. They like their interior offensive line. But those tackles in that division against those players, it's not going to cut it. They have to do better, and I think they're going to do that opportunity right now.
Well, now that you mention it, the Denver pick is in. And with the 20th overall pick, the Denver Broncos select Garrett Bowles. Kyle, call this shot. Joe, what do you think about this pick?
Well, I think this is a pick that made a lot of sense, like Kyle said. This is a team that needs help on offensive tackle. They're going to have a quarterback likely in Paxton Lynch or Trevor Siemian, whoever it is. They need to be able to protect him. And so Garrett Bowles is a nasty blocker. You watch him on Utah. This is a guy that is a super physical, aggressive, finishing style blocker that likes to move people, but he's a rare athlete for the position as well. So he's a guy that can, match up with those speed rushers in the division and really do his best to keep the quarterback clean.
I want to know why I didn't get a chance to talk about this one first. I haven't called my shot.
Kyle's mad.
So Garrett Bowles really liked the upgrade there over Stevenson as the left tackle, right? As Joe said, the movement skills are there. This is a player I've typically been very swooned by in the past. These movement mirror tackles I really like. He has some Taylor Lewan traits to him as far as the demeanor and the physicality that he brings.
Yeah.
He just needs to really play within his own means and not overextend himself trying to blow guys off the ball. And if he can do that, he can be a very solid addition to that Denver offensive line.
Now, an interesting thing is there's two other very highly rated tackles still on the board, Ryan Ramczyk and Cam Robinson. What about Bowles' game made them take him above those two players?
I think it comes down to athleticism. Yeah, he's a better athlete than those players, and he combines that with big-time run blocking skills when it's all working together. Now, he needs some work, and that's concerning because he's going to be 25 years old entering his rookie season. He's only got 1 year of experience playing at the Division I football level, so there are some concerns, but he's got that athleticism and he's got that nasty mentality that you look for in your offensive lineman, and I don't think that's matched by the rest of the field.
Yeah, the demeanor and the nastiness, you see it on the inside with some of the inside guys, but you really don't see that finish ability. Ramczyk, you see some flashes of it, but at the same time, he doesn't have the explosiveness as a blocker that you see from Bolles. So Bolles, as an older prospect, it makes sense. He's more physically mature than some of the other players, like Cam Robinson, who's a bigger body. But Bolles, he's slapped together extremely well. You could tell he takes good care of his body, and I would fully expect that functional athleticism is what really makes him stand apart for not only being explosive, but applying that explosiveness on the field of play.
Now, Kyle, you have Cam Robinson as your number 3 overall player. So obviously from a value perspective, you would have liked him a lot better than Bolles here. What do you think are the reasons why they passed on him? Do you think it's the consistency?
There's a consistency issue with Cam Robinson, and then there's some fundamental issues, and then there's off-the-field issues. So a lot of his mistakes are between the years. He had 24 penalties in 2 years. It's not going to cut it, right? It's a lot of freebie yards. It's a lot of free first downs. You can't do that. But the reason why Cam Robinson is so high on my board is because if you get him right between the ears and he plays with a fire underneath of him, there were stretches in which he was the most physically dominating player along the offensive line in the entire country. He had very strong stretches of games. They just didn't last for full seasons. So it's finding out what do you need to do, how do you need to coach a player like this to help to maximize him, and then keeping him on the straight and narrow off the field, where he had an incident before the 2016 season, faced a potential felony charge for a stolen firearm that never came to pass. No charges were filed, but I'm sure that issue probably scared some teams as well.
Now, I find this interesting because, Joe, you have him actually as your 31st overall player. Where could the disconnect between you and Kyle be? Do you think it's just that you don't trust that he can be as consistent as Kyle thinks he can be? So
let's not get mistaken here. I like Cam Robinson, not nearly as much as Kyle does. And for me, it comes down to some of the technical issues where getting consistency with his angles as a pass blocker, he commits a lot of penalties, and he just has a lot of misassignments in terms of picking up stunts. So I think there's a lot more work. I do recognize the upside.
Now, the picks are coming in hot and fiery. The pick is in for the Detroit Lions. With the 21st overall pick, the Detroit Lions pick linebacker from Florida, Jarrad Davis, a Draft Dudes podcast alumnus, came on.
Yes.
You guys were talking him up how much of a dude he was. How happy are you with this pick?
He lives and breathes football. Yeah. And I did not have the pleasure of being on that show. Our national scout, Roger Dixon, and Joe Marino did that interview. Roger Dixon, a former teammate of Jarrad Davis at the University of Florida. Jarrad, leadership intangibles are off the charts. The intensity that he plays the game, the athleticism and explosiveness that he plays the game with are really, really startling. He has some poor habits in space as a tackler. But that speed on the second level, it's something we've talked about for a number of teams, including Arizona when they selected Haason Reddick. So now Jarrad Davis, as a fast-to-flow, explosive player on the second level, is going to give Detroit, who lost a number of linebackers in this offseason, a whole nother level on that defensive line.
Yeah, Jarrad Davis, a player I rated in the first round, he is going to be a field general, a type of high-urgency linebacker that you look for. Kyle mentioned it. This is a guy with tremendous football character, and he's going to give your defense an identity, an enforcer on the second level. He can cover. He can get out into the boundary and make tackles. He can play forward with high levels of physicality, exactly what you're looking for in a second-level defender.
Now, Kyle actually, in his mock draft, put Jarrad Davis to the Lions. Kyle, we haven't really touched on the fit with the Lions. What made this such a great fit in your mind?
Sure. Well, just for the record, I also had Garrett Bolles in my mock draft as well. So
As did I.
I've got 2 for 2 in the 20s here. Yeah. I just want to point that out. Jarrad Davis, I knew for a fact, I was at the NFL Combine this year, they fell in love with Haason Reddick. So once it became apparent as Reddick continued throughout the draft process that he was not going to be there, it was that correlation for me to ask myself and say, okay, who has traits and athleticism like Hassan Reddick that's going to be a realistic option here in the 20s, knowing that Detroit is looking at linebackers and they're looking for explosive linebackers. And seeing those two connections come into place and seeing Davis make as strong of a push as he did, and his 2015 tape was tremendous when he was not injured. He battled a ton of injuries this year, played through a lot of them, so you have nothing but respect for that effort. It just seemed like a natural progression as far as option 1B instead of 1A.
Yeah, in terms of his athletic profile, this is a player that tested through the roof at the pro day. Obviously, he was hampered by injuries, like Kyle said, throughout the season, but you saw him test it. He wanted to play. You saw him in the SEC championship game against Alabama. That guy was on fire.
He came in and out like 3 separate times.
Throwing his helmet. I mean, this guy was just the type of fiery guy that you want to go to war with, and that's what you want in that second-level defender, a guy that's going to be the signal caller for your defense. And I got a lot of respect for the man, and, you know, he came off of that injury and tested, you know, just some of the most eye-popping numbers of anybody in this class. So you wonder if there's even another layer to his athleticism.
Yeah.
Now, it's interesting. Us on the outside, we don't get to interview all the players. We don't get to talk to them. We don't get to know the kind of guys that they are. How important was you to be able to talk to him and know how much he loves football, the type of fiery competitor he is? You can hear it. Anybody who listens to that interview, you can hear the passion in every word that he says.
Yeah, chilling stuff, really, when you got a chance to talk to him. I wish I could all 300 of these guys. It just doesn't happen. But in that conversation, I think it really helped having Roger Dixon, his former teammate, on with me to let him open up. And he really did, talking about stories where Jarrad Davis is at the stadium 11 o'clock at night, day before the game. Nobody's there. He's just on the field talking about how he wants to be familiar with his environment, and he wanted to envision himself making plays. And this is just a guy that lives, eats, breathes, sleeps football. And you just know he's never going to cheat his teammates. He's going to be accountable, and he's going to just take on everything you want in terms of being a pro. He's already proven that he is that player. And I think that's a rarity in this day and age of football players. He's a throwback in that mentality. My chance to speak with him really did speak volumes, and he was a first-round grade for me.
Now, you mentioned that he's not going to cheat his teammates. But in high school, I was always the type, I wasn't afraid to cheat. So I was looking over at Kyle's piece of paper over here, and you already marked Forrest Lamp down for the Dolphins at number 22. Are you calling your shot again, Kyle?
I'm on a roll. Shoot or shoot, right? That's what they say. So, and winners win. So I've won the last two. We're going to go for it here. Yeah, it just makes sense. You know, Pouncey has dealt with injuries the past several years for them. There's been issues at left guard for them. They played Laramie Tunsil there. They got rid of Brandon Albert, traded him to Jacksonville. So there's been a lot of movement along that offensive line. And I feel really good about the Dolphins looking that direction if they choose to do so.
Well, I guess we're about to find out because the pick is in. And with the 22nd overall pick, the Miami Dolphins select Charles Harris. Kyle.
All right, so shoot or shoot, lose is lose. So Charles Harris, twitched up player, right? He's a splash player for better and for worse. He loves to get in the backfield and play aggressive. And the Dolphins need to start thinking about life after Cameron Wake. So if there's any positivity behind this pick, it's the fact that Cameron Wake there is somebody that Charles Harris could learn a lot from. As far as
similar players,
yeah, their build and structure is not dissimilar. Yeah. They both play and win with first step and explosiveness, and Harris just needs to rein himself in. And if he can do that, he can be a quality player.
Yeah, speed off the edge, right? This is a player that can really challenge an offensive tackle's ability to take away his landmarks on the edge track. He's got good speed around the edge. He's got good cornering ability. My concerns with Charles Harris is that's about it. He needs to develop his entire pass rush arsenal, and I really don't have much confidence at all about him as a run defender. So this is not a pick that I love, but to Kyle's point, they've got to continue to improve their pass rushers and think about life after Cameron Wake.
Now, Charles Harris, you know, this is a guy that we talked about that we knew he was going to go first round.
Yeah.
We've been hearing about it for months.
Yeah.
It was too much smoke for there not to be any fire. But we did not like that kind of value because he was a raw player and he's not good against the run. Yeah. Now, is that going to hurt the Dolphins moving forward? Is he going to only be a pass rush specialist? He's, from a first-round pick, only participating in maybe third down in long distance situations?
Yeah, I think he has to be, especially his first year in the league, if not longer. Cameron Wake, who is just an absolute freak of nature to come back from an Achilles tear and have the season that he did, double-digit sacks, explosiveness that he has, but Father Time at the end of the day is always undefeated.
Yes, it is.
So Cameron Wake is in his mid-30s. He started late in the league, so he is beginning to reach the twilight of his career. I'm looking at this from the perspective of a mentorship for Charles Harris and really try to let him capture that lightning in a bottle, because he can be that caliber player, because Cameron Wake's not the greatest run defender either. He gets swallowed up at the point of attack. But the Dolphins have done very well to manage his reps and put him in situations to be impactful. They'll have to do the same thing with Charles Harris.
Now, Joe, with Charles Harris, he's coming from Missouri. Even though they changed defensive line coaches this year, that's a university that has put a lot of pass rush talent into the NFL. You got Alvin Smith. You got Shane Ray, who in limited situations has shown that he can rush. You got Marcus Golden over with Arizona. Does that maybe make them a little bit more okay with this because he comes from a school that have shown that they develop good pass rushers?
That's something I like to fight against. You really want to focus on scouting the player and not the helmet or anything like that. Charles Harris has been one of the most difficult players because there was this growing sense that he was going to get drafted in the first round. He's at the draft, and pegging him was a real challenge. And I thought Miami was more of a prototype team, so I didn't think this was the place that he would go. But if you can take the best of Cameron Wake and try to get that into Charles Harris, maybe there's some appeal.
Yeah, and the luxury for the Dolphins is they did retain Branch, the defensive end who played a lot of rundowns for them, was the primary defensive end across from Cameron Wake. So that will allow them to have the flexibility that they're going to need to have, because Harris is realistically looking at a season in which he should really only see between 400 and 600 snaps, and most of these should be pass rush snaps.
Yeah.
Now, Harris, he's an interesting guy. His combine was a really interesting situation for me. Now, I think we all say, even though we're not big fans of him in the first round, he looked on tape to have one of the best first steps in this class, but yet he didn't test like that at the combine. How much does that worry you even more about this?
Yeah, it's curious because then he went to his pro day, and obviously you have to adjust pro day numbers versus combine numbers, but his pro day numbers, even his vertical, you don't have to adjust a vertical jump. He jumped like 3 or 4 inches higher at his pro day than he did at the combine. So I guess maybe just remembering sometime these are human beings.
Yep.
Maybe he was sick, maybe he had something going on, maybe he didn't get great sleep. Whatever the conditions were, something made that combine testing what it was. But I thought his pro day numbers, even his jumps and his lower body explosiveness, was much more indicative of the athlete that we thought he was on film than what the combine showed.
All right, now moving ahead. New York Giants, a team that really came on last year, played really well. One of the best defenses in the NFL last year with, Jason Pierre-Paul, Olivier Vernon as bookends, playing really, really, really well.
Yeah.
Where do you see them going here?
They have the opportunity to add to this receiving crop with somebody like David Njoku at tight end, who I would absolutely love. But they did bring in Brandon Marshall, so they have Odell Beckham, Sterling Shepard, and Brandon Marshall at the receiving core. Speaking of teams that are in the twilight of a window, right? With Eli Manning reaching the end of his career, might not be a bad idea, but Joe's already talked about you can build pieces around an aging quarterback that don't have to be skill players. So I think this is a real candidate to see an offensive tackle come off the board if they're willing to accept that the investment in the Miami offensive tackle that they took a couple years ago, Eric Flowers, has not manifested itself the way they would want it to.
It's interesting in that offense. Eli Manning gets the ball out quick. So I've been very much pounding the table for them to go offensive tackle, but if they believe in the scheme somewhat protects for itself, maybe they don't go offensive tackle. I probably would. I don't love their linebackers. The group that they're featuring is very underwhelming to me. The issue is that the Jared Davis that I thought would probably be available is not there.
So now who are your options? You have Zach Cunningham. You have Raekwon McMillan.
Those are the guys.
Those have to be the two players in consideration unless you're going to bring Tyus Bowser from Houston into play as an off-the-ball kind of player as well.
Always in the market for edge rushers, right? The New York Giants. So
yes.
Is that in play? This is a very interesting position. I would probably lean towards that offensive line, but this will be telling.
Yeah, and with that, it looks like the pick is in for the New York Giants. It's going to be interesting to see what direction they go. They can go a plethora of different situations. And with the 23rd overall pick, the New York Giants select tight end Evan Ingram. Very surprising here. Joe, what do you think about that?
I don't hate Evan Ingram in this area. To Kyle's point, we thought this might have been David Njoku as the more upside player. Evan Ingram's a really nice football player, a nice move piece tight end, a guy that can work from the slot, work out of the backfield, and create some very difficult speed and size for the position. He doesn't offer much as a blocker, but this is about building around Eli Manning, the window's diminishing, and making sure he has every opportunity to get the football out, and Evan Ingram's a tight end that can work all three levels.
Yeah, this is the counter, their counter for the Dallas Cowboys.
And I'm the Cowboys fan bringing them up all the time.
No, I'm just saying, you don't, if you can play defense against that running game and that offense, or you can play offense against that offense. And the Giants have made it very clear with bringing in somebody like Evan Ingram as a big slot, flex tight end type player. They want to score points, and Evan Ingram is going to give them a tremendous opportunity to do so.
Now, since you mentioned the Cowboys, I'm just going to jump right in there.
Go right ahead.
The Giants are a team, they gave the Cowboys offensive line the most fits last year, so they're already set up well there to combat the Cowboys offense. Then, like you said, adding a player like tight end Evan Ingram to even make their offense even more potent with OBJ, Sterling Shepard, it's going to be they're going to be a really tough matchup for Dallas moving forward. Now, do you think this is a move that maybe puts the Giants above the Cowboys in the NFC East, Joe?
I still don't love what they have on the second level of their defense. Now, I understand there might be some problems for the Cowboys, but I just don't know that they have enough in that area. It's something they're going to have to focus on the rest of the way so that they have enough on defense to beat everybody, not just Dallas.
They have nice pieces in the secondary.
Sure.
With Janoris Jenkins and Eli Apple, Landon Collins and Darian Thompson, who was a safety out of Boise State that was very well regarded before he got hurt and missed the year. And obviously with Jason Pierre-Paul and Olivier Vernon there as well, they have very dynamic pass rushers, productive pass rushers, if not the most twitched up. So the big question for the Giants going forward, because we're so quick to have rapid reactions after the first round draft selection, because it's the names everybody knows. And that's the luxury of us doing this and having this opportunity to speak with you guys, not just today, but tomorrow as well through rounds 2 and 3, is you'll get a much clearer picture about what the instant impact players are on every team. So the Giants are now going to have to look to the second round, in which now you're really rolling the dice on day one starters and 3-down players being there at the linebacker position, but it's somewhere they almost have to look.
Now, the Giants, they have Eli Manning as quarterback, and we obviously know the kind of quarterback he is, but he is in decline in his career. Is he going to be able to get the most out of Evan Ingram over the next couple of years?
Yeah, and I think that Evan Ingram helps get the most out of Eli Manning because, as I mentioned, he's a 3-level threat. He's a guy that you can work it to quick. He can work the seams and get the intermediate parts of the field, and he can find space in deep zones. So having him is going to get the most out of Eli Manning, and then, my goodness, Odell Beckham's on the outside. So this is going to be a very difficult offense for defenses to match up with because there's so much speed.
Yeah, and Brandon Marshall
as
a size guy.
Yeah.
And Sterling Shepard, who was one of the darlings of 2016's NFL draft class at the wide receiver position.
I was a big fan.
Was my second rated wide receiver behind Josh Doxson, who went to Washington. So the pass catchers there, that's a headache. That's a problem.
Yeah.
And looking at some of these middle-tier NFC teams, it seems to be that's the theme between Tampa Bay and O.J. Howard, and now the Giants with Evan Ingram. They want to score points. They want to be able, and again, it lends itself with just the direction of the NFL and the direction of football. It's so much more difficult to play that hard-nosed physical brand of football in the secondary and on the second level. So it makes sense to take the mismatched athletes and really take advantage of what's in place. And it seems like that's what they've done.
Okay, now moving forward to the Oakland Raiders, a team from where I'm from. All Raider fans, Sacramento, California, huge Raider area, so they're going to be on their toes for this pick. What directions do you see them be able to go?
Front seven on defense, right? That's what they really need to do. The Achilles heel of that team was what they couldn't do in the front seven. Obviously, Khalil Mack is a sensational player, but I'm underwhelmed with the rest of the guys on the roster. They could go defensive tackle. They can go linebacker. Again, I'm not sure there's a whole lot of linebacker talent, but maybe a Zach Cunningham's in play. Maybe a Raekwon McMillan from from Ohio State's in play. We know that Jack Del Rio loves linebackers, so
Yeah.
I think that's very much in play. Wild card Malik McDowell. I think that this is the type of player that maybe a hard-nosed coach like Jack Del Rio can really get the most out of his freakish athletic ability.
I'm going to counter off of that and say the secondary. And the reason why is they made massive amounts of investments in last year's draft into the defensive front seven. Jahad Ward, Shalik Calhoun. The year before that was Mario Edwards as a second-round pick, and he missed most of the year because he was healthy. Khalil Mack is there. They brought Bruce Irvin as a pass rusher. They have options there. I think where I would go is I'm looking at corner. And Oakland is one of those teams that has a very definitive archetype for what they want on the boundary with their boundary corners, right? They have Sean Smith there, who's 6'2", 6'3", and they also have David Amerson, who is 6'2", 6'3". Well, we have a 6'2", 6'3" corner that's here that is similar to Charles Harris, not somebody that we would value in this range, but it's one of those where there's smoke, there might be some fire in Kevin King.
Oh, yeah.
So Kevin King here, I would connect those dots and say maybe they're preparing for life after one of David Amerson or Sean Smith. Again, this gets into roster construction, and it's not always as simple as we have a need on our roster right now. This was a team that was competitive. Who knows how well they would have done if Derek Carr did not get hurt. So they are one of the teams that I could see having the luxury of saying, we're making the investment not just for this year, but in the long term so that we can let a player go and let somebody else pay him the big money, and we have his replacement right here in the wings.
Piggybacking off that idea of they have a certain archetype they like at cornerback, could they look to transition maybe a safety like Obi Melifonwu, who has all the measurables that you would want from a big cornerback in that cover 3 system? Could he be a target here?
Yeah, so that was the player that came to mind because he gives you that versatility to play man in some situations, but also a ton of range. This is a player that is big, long, and athletic, and he can cover ground. And so Obi Melifonwu certainly does that and could fit that role as well. Ton of length.
Now, Melifonwu, how does he compare to Byron Jones, who was a similar player coming out of college who had that safety cornerback flexibility? Maybe he's not as elite of an athlete, but he's a damn good athlete. I mean, he's another one of those 3 Sigma athletes with that spark system that we know that the Raiders, Seahawks, Cowboys use.
Yeah.
Does that make sense to you too?
It does, but at the same time, Jones was a player when I watched the film, I was very much subscribed to, this is a cornerback. You could see the movement skills. You could see how well he played in phase and was able to locate the football. Melifonwu, for me, is more man-to-man on the interior. He's somebody I would feel much more comfortable at safety. Now, if they want to take last year's first-round pick in Carl Joseph and they want to transition him to play free safety and then play Obi Melifonwu and put him there, then that's something that I would be much more receptive to.
Now we got big news here with the 24th overall pick with the Raiders. Huge surprise. And with the 24th overall pick, the Oakland Raiders select Ohio State cornerback Gareon Conley. Now this is a guy, all the allegations toward him really muddled what his value would be. But when you look on the field, he is this good of a player. This is a great value from just an on-the-field perspective. How do you weigh that, Kyle, in this pick?
Sure. So the fact that Conley has had his name called tells us that NFL teams have either known about this longer than the public has, or they, in a very short amount of time, have been able to comfortably allocate all of the information that they need to feel comfortable making a first-round investment in somebody like Conley. On the field, Conley has tremendous ball skills. He's a little loose in man-to-man at the top of his coverage routes if he's playing off-man coverage. But schematically and X's and O's speaking, this is a nice fit for Oakland because he's a physical defensive back.
Yeah, I love the ball skills. And to Kyle's point, you were all over it in terms of the position cornerback. No way you could have predicted Conley, but if he was on the board, and everything was right, I think that was a great suggestion. Really helps him in the defensive backfield. He has the physicality, he has the length, and he has the man coverage skills, and also the ability to play in zone. So I think he's a universal scheme fit. Love the ball skills, and he's a playmaker on the back end.
Now this is really interesting. Do the Raiders have the structure in place to take this kind of probably the big PR hit they are going to take? They're already taking a hit moving from Oakland to Las Vegas. Mm-hmm. Is this something that adds on top of that, or maybe it takes the attention away from the move from Oakland to Las Vegas?
Yeah, it's a difficult subject to broach because there's so many layers here, right? And Oakland has traditionally been a team that any domestic issues, General Manager Reggie McKenzie has said, we're not going to touch you. We don't want you. So for the investigation that they have been able to put in since either they've known about it or since it's come out in the public, they have to be extremely confident in the resolutions that they found for them to make this decision.
Yeah, certainly. Very, very interesting. And you have to believe that they've done their due diligence here to feel comfortable. We talked about availability and reliability and return on investment. And our Reggie McKenzie is a GM that I just wouldn't bank on taking a chance.
Okay, now looking ahead to the Cleveland Browns on the clock.
Here we are,
Finally,
25.
Yeah, 13 picks later than we thought we were going to call them. But here they are. What direction do you go? There's still Kaiser's on the board, Davis Webb on the board, Peterman on the board. Where do they go quarterback, or are they just totally going to try to build around the rest of the offense?
I would like to think, just like with the first pick, common sense is going to prevail here. There are so many gifted football players in this class, whether it's someone like Budda Baker or Cam Robinson or T.J. Watt, any number of names.
Obi, Jabril Peppers, anybody.
Jabril Peppers. Forrest Lamp still on the board. You want to get a right tackle, slide somebody else, get Cam
David Njoku
out of the starting lineup. David Njoku, yeah. So there's so many options, and you're going to take a quarterback here with what's available. I'd have a really hard time subscribing to it, getting excited about it. But the writing's been on the wall where we've been talking about potentially 4 quarterbacks going in the first round.
3.
We're at 3, and my gut's telling me that this is 4.
I just hope Cleveland doesn't take a quarterback here because I just don't see a whole lot of value in the players. And can Cleveland really go through another wasted first-round pick, especially in this area where Johnny Manziel was drafted, where Brandon Weeden was drafted? Yeah. I just don't think you can do it. I just don't think you can. I'm not saying Cleveland won't because they're a wild card and their strategy over the last couple of drafts has been difficult to figure out.
Yeah.
But this is big because remember, this is the team that passed on Mitch Trubisky. This is the team that passed on Deshaun Watson. And here they are, 25.
Now, a name that interests me in regards to the Browns, if they really want to get that front 7 on defense up to par, is Malik McDowell. He's a guy that, based on talent on the field, many think that he's a top 10, top 5 player in the class. So he could be a great value pick here. How do you think he would fit in with the defense, taking the off-the-field stuff out of it?
Well, I really don't subscribe to McDowell being that caliber of a prospect personally. Mm-hmm. He spent a lot of plays on the ground, which was a problem for me. And that's not to say he's not a tremendous athlete, because he is. But you look at the team that they have in place and the position players that they have along the defensive line, there's just so much that you really like as far as Danny Shelton as an interior guy, Myles Garrett now, Emmanuel Ogbah as a counter player off of that. They have pieces, so I don't think that would make sense.
All right, well, the pick is in. And with the 25th overall pick, the Cleveland Browns select safety, linebacker maybe, Jabril Peppers. Kyle, this is a guy that you've kind of been beating the drum for, that you were one of the few in the draft community that could define a clear role, how he could be successful. Do you think the Browns are a team that can put him in that kind of role?
Well, Peppers was my 24th rated player on the board. He's off the board at 25. So I like the value here. I think it's fair. You have to go into this with the expectation of this is a player that's going to play back in the secondary. Ibrahim Campbell's the starting strong safety there. I don't care what you think of Jabril Peppers. Are you really going to tell me he's not an upgrade or at least a lateral step right now to Ibrahim Campbell? And that's not a shot to Ibrahim, because he's a solid player, but Peppers has explosiveness that Campbell does not have. He has range. He has some versatility. Campbell is, in passing situations, he's probably the first guy off the field as far as for a nickelback if they want to bring another defensive back into the formation. So Peppers, for me, I think it makes sense if they have the vision, which it sounds like they do.
Yeah, so obviously Cleveland wanted to prioritize getting better on defense in this draft. They went Myles Garrett #1, and now they've got a player playing behind him in Jabril Peppers, who is a fast-to-flow player, closes down distances quickly, is a very physical player, and he just didn't have the interception production that everyone wants in a safety, but he played linebacker at the next level. Maybe with this type of pass rush in front of him, we see more ball production, and you just like the overall football accomplishment that Jabril Peppers has had in college.
And just to build off that real quick, when they picked Myles Garrett, the thing that I said is you have an opportunity to bring in a playmaker, right? Another splash play defender. Well, Peppers is not a player that has had a lot of ball plays, but he's had a lot of run plays. I believe he had 13 tackles for loss last year. He was a player that was frequently attacking the ball, playing forward, being aggressive. He has movement skills that Demario Davis, Christian Kirksey, Joe Schobert are names in the Cleveland starting lineup right now. So I could realistically see them in nickel situations playing him an inside linebacker and getting him the closer to the line of scrimmage he is, the more effective his twitch is going to be. But Joe, this is something you talked about in the build-up to the draft. Putting him away from the ball is going to mitigate some of the mental processing issues that some people saw on film.
Yeah, no question. He's going to be able to have more time to react. He's got to develop into his new role. For me, though, with this Cleveland Browns first round, they got Myles Garrett. They've got Jabril Peppers, but I'm going to remember what they didn't do. And they didn't take Mitch Trubisky #1. They didn't take Deshaun Watson at 12. And then they didn't take a quarterback at 25.
But they do have 33.
They do, but the options here at 25 are not worth this pick. So I give them a lot of credit. We said it when we were previewing the possibility of a quarterback here, that literally anything else. And Peppers was a name that we casually brushed by, but to their credit, they didn't reach for a quarterback here, and I give them credit.
Now, one of the biggest storylines coming up to the draft was how much is that dilute sample going to matter for Jabril Peppers? Kyle, you wrote a fantastic piece on FanRag Sports about it. And basically what you said is you don't know because you're not a decision maker. Well, apparently the answer is not much at all.
Well, the general theme of that was you're going to use it to justify what you saw beforehand either way. It's not a positive test. So if you like Jabril Peppers, which the Cleveland Browns clearly did, then you would say, okay, it was not a positive test. He's in the drug program, but we feel really good about him. So let's not worry about the drug test. Let's worry about finding the fit for him. So outside of that, looking at teams that didn't like him, the question is they were looking for an excuse to write him off the board. And the dilute sample for the teams that did not like him was writing him off the board.
Now, we're 25 picks in. We got what, 6 or 7 left to go. What are some of the big storylines, the big observations that you have coming out? I mean, Reuben Foster still hasn't been picked. Is that the biggest thing that you see coming out of the first 25 picks?
It's big because the talent's there, right? The #2 player on my board. This is a special linebacker. But the issue is that he got kicked out of the combine. And not that incident in and of itself is alarming, but on a day where Reuben Foster had to be on his best behavior, he failed. He pushed the limits and got kicked out of the NFL scouting combine. That's egregious. And then you couple that with some concerns about his shoulder. You couple that with some concerns about his mentality and that he maybe enjoys the party scene, some of that information, and it's pushing him down. On field, this is a player that's worth a top 10 pick.
Yeah. So it's not necessarily the actual transgression that worries you. It's your only job is to not make a dumb decision.
Sure. And
you go to the combine and you make a dumb decision. And that makes it very difficult for some teams, if they have other questions about you off the field, to gloss over. And Tony Pauline of Draft Analyst had reported in the build-up in the week before the draft that at least 2 teams had taken Reuben Foster off of their board as potential first-round draft pick. And we're seeing that kind of come to fruition now, where team after team is continuing to look past Foster for the time being.
Now I'm looking at your guys' composite board, and you guys still have 3 players inside your top 10 still available. We got Budda Baker from Washington still available, Sidney Jones from Washington still available, and Dalvin Cook from Florida State still available. Each player comes with their own worries, but in different ways. Can you guys kind of expand upon why 3 players that you guys obviously think are foundational franchise type of guys still available at pick number 26?
Well, for Budda Baker and Sidney Jones, Budda Baker, there's some narratives regarding his size. There's some concern that he's too small to be effective at the next level, which is nonsense, point blank. So when we put together each of our own individual rankings, I had Budda Baker ranked 6th on my board. Joe, you had him rated 14th.
Yep.
So we each thought this was a first-round caliber player on film and with the rest of his resume off the field and productivity and athleticism-wise. But it doesn't. It's one of those situations where sometimes good football players fall because you're boxing them in based off the eyeball test, and I think that's what you're seeing from Baker. But it's also worth noting we weren't necessarily trying to prognosticate what was going to happen today. It's where we value the players.
Yeah.
And Joe, I would like to touch on a guy like Dalvin Cook. He doesn't have any injury concerns. You know, he didn't test great at the combine, but for running backs, that's not a huge worry. Why do you think a player of his talent level fell?
Well, I think he hasn't missed games due to injuries, but he has had 3 shoulder surgeries since high school. So that's something to be mindful of. He's a running back. And then he's got an alarming series of events off the field that raise eyebrows. And it's something that seems like every year something. And now he's not been charged, but there is a lot of smoke. Okay,
Right.
a lot of smoke.
And not even stuff that's necessarily publicized in the media either. There's a whole nother level where you hear murmurs of things that people aren't comfortable putting their name on because there's no definitive paper trail or anything like that behind it. But this is a player like that where you heard these rumblings, and that was why another one of my hot takes leading up to the draft was that Dalvin Cook is not going to go in the first round today.
Certainly a player on the field that's worthy of that, but ultimately some of those other concerns loom large here, and the reason why Dalvin Cook hasn't heard his name called.
Oh, looks like we got a trade. Falcons jumping up to number 26. You got to think they're going for a pass rusher here, right, Joe?
Well,
I do. I think I've been saying this for a while. Vic Beasley accumulated half the sacks for this team, and they need a complimentary rusher. There's nobody on that roster that gets me excited.
is this TJ Watt?
TJ Watt comes to mind.
Bowser
comes to mind. Derek Rivers is a player that I know me and you are there.
They showed a lot of interest.
Sure.
He was a pre-draft.
Sure, that would
visit.
John Owning might jump through the roof here if that happens. Really validating what we saw.
Looking at the teams that they've jumped over,
Buffalo and Seattle.
Buffalo and
Cowboys.
Seattle and Dallas.
Yeah, TJ Watt.
Teams with pass rush interest.
Yeah.
This one's going to be interesting.
One wild card, Forrest Lamp. The Seattle Seahawks,
Yeah.
we knew they were going to look for an offensive lineman. Could maybe the Falcons sweeten the pot to take maybe the guy that they thought Seattle was eyeing in Forrest Lamp?
But if Seattle's on the clock and they're enamored with that player,
They should take him.
They should take that player. So I think this is more a proactive move to get ahead of the teams below. And Seattle feels confident that they can go out and get their guy a little later on.
All right, well, the pick is in. And with the 26th overall pick, the Atlanta Falcons select UCLA defensive end Takk McKinley. Kyle, can you touch on this for me, please?
I sure can, because, John, if you look down on my tablet here, my official mock draft has the Atlanta Falcons selecting Takk McKinley this year.
Huddle report. Kyle is looking good right now.
Seven correct picks with a handful to go, so hopefully we're making a run towards the top. McKinley, twitched up player. He's a little more linear than I like, but you look at the personnel that they have on the defensive line they have Vic Beasley, Grady Jarrett. They brought in the defensive tackle Dontari Poe from Kansas City, and now Takk McKinley is a player that he has a shoulder labrum issue that he had surgery for. The questions are, is he going to be able to play right off the bat? Some people had questions about that, but this is a player that complements what they have right now on that defensive line very well.
Yeah, no question. And he's a guy who's a big-time get-off guy, gets off the ball clean, plays with great leverage, and plays with a great motor. So you have Beasley on one side, McKinley on the other, and that's a whole lot of motor coming at you. And he needs work. He needs some improvement using his hands. But in terms of hustle, in terms of get-off, some twitch, needs to work on the bend. I'm not sure if he can work on that or not, but he's got a skill set to build on and gives the Falcons a complimentary rusher they need.
Now, I've made my bones about this pick that I'm not a fan of Takk McKinley. So as somebody who follows the Cowboys, I'm very happy that he's off the board before they get there. But you guys were a little bit higher on Takk McKinley. What do you think the reasons why you guys liked him a little bit more than maybe, say, I did?
Well, first of all, I saw that little fist pump. When that pick was announced, there was a subtle fist pump here from the gentleman next to me on the podium. McKinley is somebody that I really liked for the awareness as a pass rusher. There were reps in which he was beating offensive tackles, flattening at a very tight angle, and it was with more power than bend, as Joe alluded to. This was he's not necessarily the loosest in the hips, but the ability to flatten that angle, and then once he got to his target in the quarterback, he was one of the most intelligent attack players, reaching his platform and reaching his target as far as attacking the football. Caused a lot of turnovers attacking the football when he's flattening and turning the corner. So that really stood out to me as a trait that I really liked about Takk McKinley.
Now, moving forward, number 27, the Buffalo Bills. Joe, I can see a little beads of sweat. I can see you getting a little bit worried. What direction do you want them to go here?
You know, I think this is interesting. The same positions that I thought were in play at 10 are in play. I've been talking O.J. Howard to the Bills. Who's there? David Njoku. You want to talk about an upside pass catcher for Tyrod Taylor? I think that would be a great pick. They still need speed on the second level at linebacker. Zach Cunningham would be a good fit for Sean McDermott and what he likes to do. Obviously needs in the secondary, and we know Sean McDermott values length. He values guys that are versatile. Obi Melifonwu. That's a big-time player that fits that description. So I think those are the three players that come to mind for me with Buffalo here. Maybe an outside chance at offensive tackle. Jordan Mills is the right tackle, something that can be upgraded, but Buffalo has options, and it's certainly an interesting proposition.
Now, here we go. The pick is in. And with the 27th overall pick, the Buffalo Bills select cornerback Tre'Davious White from LSU. Joe, right back to you on your Bills. How do you feel about this pick?
I think this is a solid pick, right? So you have a need here at cornerback. Trey White is an experienced player, a senior four-year starter for LSU. He has the length and he has the tackling ability. Sean McDermott said our defense would be predicated on how good of tacklers our cornerbacks are. Well, so you get that tackling upside. You have a guy that's sticky in man coverage and has the experience to play in zone. So I think this is just a very solid double and a player that fits a position of need for Buffalo.
Yeah, not everything has to be a home run pick,
sure.
Right? And they just lost Stephon Gilmore on the boundary. So this addition makes sense as far as losing a player, replacing a player. Really like his ball skills. Thought he was really good at recovering and getting back into a position to contest the football. So he should be a productive player in the secondary for the Buffalo Bills.
Now, Tre'Davious White, what kind of corner, where does he thrive? Is he a guy that thrives in man coverage, or is he a guy you want to play in the zone, or maybe even reduce him down to the slot?
Yes. So I think that's one of the great things about Tre'Davious White is I think he gives you all of those elements. We know that Buffalo is going to play a lot of cover three, and they're going to ask their cornerbacks to tackle. And so I think those two areas where what he can do in those areas, driving on the football from playing off man, playing forward, and tackling is really where he helps this team. Right now, slated to have Ronald Darby and Kevon Seymour as their two starting cornerbacks. Darby's okay, but sixth-round pick out of USC, Kevon Seymour is not really a player you want to enter with. Obviously, the Stephon Gilmore leaving creates the need, and this just makes sense.
Yeah, so I think the White addition where I like him best is in playing in the hip pocket. So playing man-to-man coverage for me is where I like him and think he has the best chance to be successful, because there are times in which when he looks back for the football, he kind of loses track of his receiver. But that to me is a very easy fix. And he consistently tracks the ball so well that he finds himself back in a position at the catch point to contest and high point the football and challenge it at its highest point. So for me, playing White in up situations and letting him get into the hip pocket early in routes is where you're going to find success.
So Joe, how does this affect the Buffalo Bills defense? Are they improved pass defense now? Are they a lot better, or are they just taking maybe a little tiny step forward?
I think Kevon Seymour to Tre'Davious White is a pretty nice jump. And so you really solidify that. You've added Micah Hyde. You've added Jordan Poyer. You had Ronald Darby in place. And I think you finally have a group in the defensive back that you feel comfortable with. Still needs on the second level. Still not a whole lot of speed there. So I think that's something that's in play. Now remember, Buffalo now has a second, third-round pick and an additional 2018 first-round pick that they got from trading back this far. So I think that's the give and take where you don't really get a true top-of-the-first-round talent, but you get a very solid player. I'd be hard-pressed to see and look back and say that Tre'Davious White wasn't a reliable football player.
Joe, my question for you is with Stephon Gilmore. You had mentioned that the White addition over who was currently slated in that slot is an upgrade. How do you feel like the addition of White versus Stephon Gilmore in the secondary, what status does that put this secondary at compared to last year's?
I think that's interesting because Stephon Gilmore is a player who had an outstanding 2015 season, probably one of the best 5 or 10 cornerbacks in football, and then struggled a lot last season, seemed to be in self-preservation mode quite a bit. He's coming back from a couple of different shoulder injuries where Stephon Gilmore not being able to play with physicality was a big hindrance to his game. He actually had given up quite a few touchdowns, more than people expect. Obviously, the upside's there if he's healthy. But if you're improving 2016 Stephon Gilmore, I think it's an upgrade. 2015 Stephon Gilmore is one of the better cornerbacks in the league. So it's an interesting perspective, but also you have to think Stephon Gilmore, more of that man bump and run type player. Is he going to be maximized with the financial investment that you have to make in him in Sean McDermott's scheme?
Sure. And I felt like Trey White's going to give you a little more as a tackler as well. So reading and going back to what Coach McDermott said about what's going to make the defense tick, it seems like a nice marriage in that regard as well.
Okay, now, Cowboys on the clock.
Who?
The Dallas Cowboys are on the clock, and they're obviously, I think, going to be looking pass rusher here. Now, T.J. Watt's on the board. We talked about T.J. a lot. Tyus Bowser on the board. Okay, what direction do you think they go? Actually, Kyle, what direction do you think they could go?
T.J. Watt. I think it's a home run pick. I know they like T.J. Watt. I had him in my mock draft, so if you were asking me to put some money down, I'm not a betting man, but if I was going to go that way.
All right, and the pick is in. With the 28th overall pick, the Dallas Cowboys select defensive end from Michigan, Taco Charlton. Now, this is a guy that, Kyle, you are a big fan of. Can you please raise my spirits?
Well, there's no reason to fret because Taco Charlton has the ability to become a very, very good pass rusher at the NFL level. Where he needs to get better is utilizing his hands consistently to play off of contact. But this is a player that at 6'5", 6'6", consistently plays with lower pads and tilt rushing off the edge than players that are 2 or 3 inches shorter than he is. The tilt off the edge that he is able to generate is very impressive stuff. It is the baseline trait for having success as a pass rusher at the next level. So that's a very important thing. I like that they're getting a pass rusher, and I don't dislike that it's Taco Charlton. Yeah,
it's a position of need. We've talked about edge as a big need for the Dallas Cowboys. They get a guy who has a ton of length and a lot of bend, to Kyle's point, that is really going to be able to challenge the passing game and something that Dallas needs. I'm okay with the value. I think everyone wanted T.J. Watt and maybe some different options, but you get a more prototypical type player. Jerry Jones has been knocking out of the park lately, so let's trust Mr. Jerry Jones, who's been a great drafter lately.
Trust the process.
I have to trust the process.
Yes.
Because from my own personal point of view, when I saw Taco Charlton play, I saw all the traits that you guys saw, but I didn't see the elite type of athlete that Dallas needs coming off that right defensive end spot. I mean, we have DeMarcus Lawrence already there. They have David Irving. They got the only speedy guy they got is that Charles Tapper. So, I really would have liked them to infuse a lot more athleticism, a lot more burst into their defense.
Sure.
But overall, he's even on my board. I had him as a second-round value, so you can't hate this pick, but it's just not the direction that I would have went.
And that's fair. It's one of the difficult things about going through the draft process and being a fan of a team, right? It is you study all these players, you become married to the idea of adding certain players to your roster. And John Oning's been pounding the table for T.J. Watt for 2 months. So it was right there, and now it's gone, and that's all right because I really think you have a really solid piece in play here.
Okay, now we can move away from my pain. Skip that. The Browns have traded up with the Green Bay Packers to number 29. Now, I've been hinting at a quarterback all night. Is this the time where they get the quarterback? And if they do, who is it?
I think it's Davis Webb.
Yeah. We've had a lot of information that Davis Webb is a player that's valued much higher than the draft community, much more than Kyle and I certainly value. I'm not going to overlook DeShone Kizer here, another player that's valued much differently than Kyle and I, but you have to think Cleveland is moving up for a quarterback. But we could be wrong. They've already passed on Deshaun Watson and Mitch Trubisky, every other quarterback. They've already passed up on the quarterback they would take with this pick just a few picks earlier.
But maybe seeing it play out and knowing that they were there at 33.
Sure.
This is that fifth year of control.
It is.
That's what this is. So
we think
if they elect to go that way, no, it's just I don't. I respect the recipe of not reaching on a player at 25, as you alluded to, Joe.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you had 2 opportunities in the top 12 picks to land a quarterback, and I think it's at the best case scenario a lateral move to drop off and take one of these other players now that is obviously a tier lower down as far as the caliber of the player. But at the same time, they must believe in whoever they're making this move
Let's
for.
not sleep on the Cleveland Browns are one of the coaching staffs at the Senior Bowl. Josh Dobbs was there. Davis Webb was there. Could this be a situation where they're even more comfortable because they've had a chance to see these quarterbacks up close and personal?
It's a very real possibility.
Yeah.
I just don't know what to do if Josh Dobbs ends up being a first-round selection because the tape is so shaky, right? But you have to feel it's a quarterback. It's just a question of which one that they want to go up and get.
All right, the pick is in. And with the 29th overall pick, the Cleveland Browns select David Njoku.
We know nothing.
The Browns don't like quarterbacks right now. But this
Good.
seems like a great value pick.
Yes.
Joe, illustrate it.
Yeah, no question. This is a first-round value. They went out and they traded up to get a tight end that whoever's playing quarterback for the Cleveland Browns next year is going to love throwing the football to. David Njoku is a threat in the passing game at all levels. He's really good after the catch. He has a ton of upside, just a redshirt sophomore. We just saw what he can do down the stretch. 8 touchdowns his last 7 games. This is a big-time threat at tight end in the passing game.
Yeah, Cleveland, they made a lot of investment in pass catchers in last year's draft, but they're running off of Gary Barnidge as their starting tight end right now. Njoku gives them a whole nother level as far as being a pass catcher and a real potential to be an alpha player in the middle of the field. Really love what this can become for the Browns. It's just a question of who's throwing them the ball.
Now, it's interesting. Now, who is going to throw them the ball? Is it going to be Cody Kessler? Is it going to be Brock Osweiler? Who do you think is going to win that job?
I guess Cody Kessler right now, although Cleveland's obviously banking on the rest of their opportunities to do so. I don't think they can come away with nothing at the position, but maybe when it's all said and done, they don't like any of the quarterbacks, and they feel good about giving Cody Kessler another year and seeing what they have because he didn't hurt the team. He didn't help the team, but he didn't hurt the team when he played last year.
And we'll have to see what the terms of this trade was, but Cleveland had a lot of capital moving in. I feel pretty certain they probably don't earn pick 33, but if they were targeting the quarterbacks, at least they're probably going to pick them more in the range where they should go. Yeah.
And with the quarterbacks positions that have been filled, there's much less demand now as well. So you should see less of those second or third tier quarterbacks going disproportionately and should take some of the stress off of Cleveland to feel like they need to make a move and go get one.
Now, how do you feel about the Packers here moving down, maybe probably into the second round? Do you like this move for them with the players that are on the board?
They've had a mass exodus of players. If you look at some of the talent they lost, their players were signing everywhere. So a team that is historically very competitive but really needs to rebuild and retool their roster. They got torched in the passing game, so they need some help on the second level. They lost to Julius Peppers, so some help in the front seven is needed. And then some of the offensive line has left. So there's a lot of different areas that Green Bay needs to go. Running back right now, Ty Montgomery's slated to be their starting running back. So I'm a fan of them moving back and giving them more chances to fill some of the holes that's been created by the players that's left.
Yeah, I'm surprised they left someone like Chidobe Awuzie on the board. I thought, I'm being dead serious.
Yeah.
I thought that was a player that they were certainly going to target here in the late 20s. The writing was on the wall with Awuzie being invited to the draft that he was a player that was going to be prioritized. They need all the secondary help that they can get. Maybe they look running back. Maybe they want the opportunity to take either Dalvin Cook or Joe Mixon here. And 33, it's outside the first round.
Yes.
So you mitigate the impact of having that player be the face of your draft class because he's not a first-round draft selection. You feel the value's more fair, and maybe that's an avenue you see Green Bay go and target one of these high-end potential starting running backs, provided they make it these last couple picks into the second round.
Okay, moving forward, number 30th overall pick, Pittsburgh Steelers. They're another team that's been connected to a lot of edge rushers, and the board fell really well for them. What kind of direction do you think they can go, Coach?
Well, first of all, I'm a little upset because I had them taking David Njoku in my mock draft. But I think they have ample opportunity to take quality football player here at 30, and I would expect them to do so.
Okay, the pick is in. And with the 30th overall pick, the Pittsburgh Steelers select Wisconsin outside linebacker T.J. Watt, the guy that Kyle Krabs has been driving the bandwagon on for the entire draft process. Kyle, how do you feel?
I watched Watt's film in the middle of January and was really impressed for a 2-year player what he was able to illustrate as far as the functional and applied intelligence, that he was reading plays, attacking blocks, staying in gaps, really rare stuff. And then the hand usage that he had as a 2-year player, some of the best hands in the class as far as parlaying away from contact, staying off of bodies, rallying and collecting himself off of bodies, and gathering his balance and attacking the football. I really like this as the next step type pass rusher for the Pittsburgh Steelers.
Yeah, he's kind of got that Pittsburgh Steeler feel to him, right? Just a dog kind of guy that's just never going to get cheated on a rep. He's going to attack with power and plays with a tremendously high motor. He's going to be able to chase plays down from the backside. He's going to hold the edge in the front side. He's got pass rush upside. Kyle, you said that he has the upside to be the best pass rusher in this class. What a pick for Pittsburgh right here at the end of the first round.
Yeah, I think this 3-year projection for him, we've certainly talked about it more this year more than ever. Players having 1, 3, and 5-year projections. You know, you're expecting what you're getting first year as a rookie, the middle of their rookie contract, and when it's time for the second contract. What can you expect from a player? I think Watt's ceiling is tremendous. I think if he really continues to play up to where his level is right now as a greener player, you can get really excited about T.J. Watt and what he can become and develop into. You saw some parallels drawn to someone like Clay Matthews, where it's that motor is the same thing. And as a pass rusher coming out, Clay Matthews was fairly similar in that he didn't have the most versatile repertoire as a rusher.
Now, T.J. Watt on the opposite side of Bud Dupree, that's a really, really athletic set of edge rushers. Now, that's going against the strategy they took when they took Jarvis Jones, who's not athletic at all as an edge rusher. Do you see this as a philosophical change for the Steelers, Joe?
Yeah, I think you can't help but look that way. A lot of times you see players that teams pick and then they go the complete opposite. Just like with coaches, you see a team fire a coach that's one style and then hire the complete opposite type of player. I don't think you can help but draw those parallels by them going from, you know, a guy who was uber productive, didn't have the athletic traits to go with it, to guys that didn't quite have the productivity but have the upside and athletic ability. Certainly could be a philosophical change.
Well, you've seen over the past several years, Ryan Shazier 3 years ago was not a player that the Pittsburgh Steelers were going to target. No, they're looking for thumpers on the inside, and they very much adopted this new speed mantra. And T.J. Watt, if left unoccupied on the back end, is one of the quickest to crash defensive linemen in this draft class. He is very quick to close, crash down, get down the line of scrimmage. He has speed, playing forward as well. So the theory of speed in defenses in today's NFL, you're continuing to see that extension with T.J. Watt going to Pittsburgh, with all the linebacker speed that they have there now. It's a really impressive collection.
All right, moving forward, the Seahawks are back on the clock at number 31. Still, Obi Melifonwu on the board there. Is he a type of guy that you think would go to Seattle?
As a matter of fact, I do, because I mocked Seattle to take Obi Melifonwu. So this is the last chance that I have for a hit, and I really like the marriage as far as what is Seattle like in the secondary, right? They like big, long bodies. They don't necessarily care how fast you run. Now, Melifonwu's a special case because he blazed his 40. The length and the influence that he has in the middle of the field and defending tight ends, that catch radius is very large. And somebody that has flexibility to potentially be a corner, be a safety, Earl Thomas had some questions. Is Earl Thomas coming back from the broken leg? He had flirted with retirement. Maybe it's a contingency plan. Maybe it's looking forward, projecting their roster forward. But I would really like this selection here if it were to come.
Kevin King also,
Yes.
he fits that mold. I think,
and he's local.
Yeah,
too.
he's local. I would go Melifonwu personally, but I don't think we can discount that Kevin King is here. He's another long, big, athletic cornerback that really fits what Seattle likes in the secondary.
Now, interesting. Could they go offensive line here? Is
Yes,
this a
definitely.
time? Or this seems like a great opportunity. There's still a lot of good offensive linemen on the board.
There's only been one drafted.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they're all there. Forrest Lamp's there. Cam Robinson's there. Ryan Ramczak's there. So if they wanted to use resources,
Yeah.
which is a rarity for Seattle, I mean, I
Yeah.
give them credit to Fetty, but
Yeah.
for the most part, they just want bodies. This would be a chance for them to make a statement and give Russell Wilson someone that can block.
And you have a pure left tackle
Yes.
in Cam Robinson. You have a pure left
Ryan.
tackle in Ryan Ramczyk.
Yep.
You have a pure left guard or potentially center in Forrest Lamp. They've been very clear that Germain Ifedi is a right side of the offensive line player for them. So I would expect that to be something that the Seahawks are probably going to wrestle with quite a bit.
Well, actually not, because they just traded with the 49ers. The 49ers are coming. Are they finally the team coming up for a quarterback? We've been talking about these guys all night. Are they? Has John Lynch found his guy?
I'm not going to get honeypotted this time. We've gotten excited every trade about a quarterback. I'm not going to get my hopes up until I hear the pick announced by you, John.
And it's one thing that we mentioned is that when San Francisco moved back from 2 to 3, they set themselves to be able to go ahead and dictate this draft. And maybe there's a player worth trading up for. Let's see.
All right, well, the pick is in. And with the 31st overall selection, the San Francisco 49ers take Alabama linebacker Reuben Foster. He finally comes off the board. One of the biggest storylines. Joe, you're number 2 overall player, if I'm correct?
Yes, he is.
This is a fantastic value.
Wow. Yeah, it is. This is a player, I got to give Kyle credit. We were talking, because we do a 3 times a week podcast. We work together for NDT Scouting. We have a lot of conversations. We talked about an interior triangle of Armstead, of Buckner, and Foster.
Yeah.
But we talked about it being with the number 2 pick.
Yeah.
Well, here we
we
are,
are.
pick 31. Reuben Foster had the worst 2 months of any player could possibly have leading up to the draft. He falls here, but I think he's in an outstanding situation to be the identity for the San Francisco 49ers defense. He is a physical, aggressive player, and I think he has the talent. Now, everything needs to come together in terms of off the field, in terms of the health, but he's one of the better linebackers we've seen come out in the last 5 years.
This is a Patrick Willis caliber player at the linebacker position. There is scary potential here behind a defensive line that now totes Solomon Thomas, Eric Armstead, DeForest Buckner, big horses up front. So you can play Armstead at the 3 tech, you can play Buckner at a base 4-3, and Thomas on the back end of that. And that's going to allow a lot of opportunities for Reuben Foster to flow free on the second level.
Now, do you think this is the type of guy that can really jumpstart that 49ers defense, give them a new identity with their new coaching staff?
My goodness, yeah, because that's the intensity. What was General Manager John Lynch known for when he was playing?
Yeah.
Intensity.
Yeah.
Reuben Foster
Dog.
is that same exact mentality as far as the way he gets after people. How many times have you seen somebody run into Leonard Fournette and ragdoll him? That's what Foster has the explosive capabilities to do. So this is going to rejuvenate and reinvigorate a lot of intensity in that defensive front.
San Francisco has come away with my number 2 player in Reuben Foster and my number 6 player in Solomon Thomas. They've stockpiled picks by moving back 1 slot in the first round. I think John Lynch is hitting a home run here in his first draft.
And the only thing they gave up to move up 4 spots or 3 spots was 111.
Yeah. Heck of a job.
Yeah.
Now, from
Everyone underestimated Mr. John Lynch, the Stanford player. Come on now.
Now, from the Seahawks' point of view, do you think they were okay moving back because there's so many offensive linemen on the board? I mean, we're at 32 now, and there's at least 3 really good offensive linemen still on the board.
So New Orleans is not necessarily a large threat to take an offensive lineman. They could obviously trade out of that slot if they would like to. But first of all, how about the trades that we've seen here in the first round? This was something that we talked about. We expected to see a lot of movement and here we are. Ton of trades here.
Yeah.
I think we've had 5 or 6 in the first round. So Seattle, knowing that Ramczyk, Lamp, and Robinson are all on the board, they're moving back 3 spots. If one person doesn't take an offensive lineman, you're going to get somebody you're probably going to feel really good about, plus Obi Melifonwu who's still in play for them, and Kevin King.
Seattle doesn't pick in the first round. We should have known, right? We should have known. They couldn't do it. So, to Kyle's point, all the value, all the same players they were looking for right here at 31 are going to be there at 34, and they pick up 111. This is a good deal for both teams.
Yeah.
Now, moving ahead to number 32, the New Orleans Saints. What kind of directions can they go? Do they keep hitting the defense, or could they go on offense?
I think they could go either way.
Ready to take a stand, Kyle?
Yeah. Listen.
Zane Gonzalez, not his player.
Listen, Brandon Cooks is gone, right?
Yeah.
So if they feel enamored with a wide receiver, I'm never going to say never and take it off the table.
Sure.
They love their offense, right? Now, I think the most likely play here is a defensive prospect. Maybe somebody, a pass rusher. There's still a couple names out here that you could get excited about as first-round guys with some twitch.
Zach Cunningham, out of Vanderbilt, linebacker.
As an athletic linebacker would make sense for them as well. We talked about how they need athleticism on the second level. Tyus Bowser's here. He can play a really nice Sam and play pass coverage and then occasionally work up into an on-the-ball situation and rush the passer. So they have options. It's just a question of if anybody else on the panel would like to take a more firm stance than I did when I was posed the question.
I'll make a firm stance. No kicker, no long snapper here.
So punter's on the table.
So New Orleans, I don't see the value in offense for them at this point in the draft. And for me, it does go to the defensive side of the ball, where Zach Cunningham would be a nice second-level addition to them. I'm not sure there's a whole lot of cornerbacks. They've already taken Marshawn Lattimore, but that was a heck of a pick right there at number 11. So it'll be very curious to see what New Orleans does if they're able to capitalize on their multiple first-round picks like we've seen San Francisco and Cleveland do.
You know, New Orleans is interesting. They got Drew Brees. His window is closing. So the Saints need to win now. What players help them the most win right now?
I think it's Zach Cunningham. I really do. He's a 3-year starter in the SEC for Vanderbilt. He was the big-time playmaker the last 2 seasons. I think he can work to all levels of the football field. He can cover. He can work into the boundary, in the box. He just has some issues coming to balance as a tackler.
I think Raekwon McMillan's a more attractive scheme fit for them.
You're sure, but I think they might value that speed and range, which I think you get more of from Cunningham.
Sure, but McMillan tested well. So some people would argue that he has better range than what he was given credit for. So I think linebacker's the primary to look at. I would not discount Tyus Bowser. I really think in a 4-3 Sam situation, that is a player that can make a really big difference in that division covering the tight ends.
And what about Malik McDowell? It's obviously the last chance for him to be a first-round pick.
They have Nick Fairley, Sheldon Rankins,
and
Cam Jordan.
It's unlikely, but if we're going to go completely no defensive tackles, and this is the last chance.
You know, how much of a possibility is it for New Orleans to trade down? You know, that's the thing we've seen. We've been talking about 5th-year options for players, and it doesn't even have to be quarterbacks. It could be any other players. Is there a player here that you can see somebody else moving up for?
Yes.
Who?
I was just doing another 50-50. No, I could see it. I don't want to project because it's difficult at this point. There's one spot, and that 33rd pick is just as valuable right now as that 32nd pick because all these teams are looking and they're waiting for this last domino to fall before they say, okay, we've got all night to reassess the board, reassess our roster, reassess everybody else's rosters, and then come back with the battle plan. So I would not sleep on if you have one of these picks in the first 5 or 6 picks in the second round, you have at this point just as valuable of a pick as the 32nd pick, but you have to give something up to go up and get that.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I just don't think we can discredit quarterbacks, right? Is there a possibility? I don't think there's a great fit, but if they want to have their successor for Drew Brees, this could be a chance. It's a luxury pick, right? This is the pick that they got for Brandon Cooks to have the second first-round pick. If we're going to get that 4th quarterback, this is our last chance in the first round.
Do you think there's a chance that they could get a Brandon Cooks replacement right now?
Well,
John Ross is gone. So that's
So yeah, you start.
that was who I had mocked at 32.
Curtis Samuel, Carlos
Yeah.
Henderson.
Yeah, a luxury player might make sense, but I don't necessarily see the value right here.
All right, well, the pick is in. And with the 32nd overall pick, the New Orleans Saints select Ryan Ramczyk from Wisconsin. Kyle, you kind of discounted them as a chance for an offensive tackle, but they go with my OT1 here.
Yeah, really surprising because they have a lot invested in the offensive line between Andrus Peat, Max Unger, Larry Warford, Zach Strief. These are all players that they have.
Teron Armstead.
And Teron Armstead really like their offensive line group. So this seems like a preemptive preparing for life after someone.
Yeah.
So not necessarily a pick that's a must-have as far as the quote-unquote win now, but sometimes these decisions are the best ones in the long term.
Yeah, so I don't hate the value. I don't necessarily think that the Saints made themselves better right now with this pick, but if they want to have depth along the offensive line and they want to have a contingency plan for maybe a Zach Strief leaving, they've got a player now in Ryan Ramczyk who has some of the most natural physical tools in this class to be a really good pass blocker and also get some movement in the run game.
All right, guys, well, we did it. We went through the whole first round. We were standing the whole time.
That's true.
A lot of surprises, a lot of trades. What's the one takeaway you're going to have from today, Kyle?
First of all, that I was the only person that didn't need to take a drink of water up here the whole time. No, this was a lot of fun with you guys. Looking forward to doing it again tomorrow. I always look forward to after we reach the first round because Joe and I do not do boards that are meant to be prognosticative, that you look at the players that we valued and see where the disconnect was. Players like Budda Baker that we really valued that the NFL did not.
I think the two big takeaways were the two aggressive moves to move up for quarterbacks. We saw Kansas City move up, give away a 3 and a next year's number 1 to get Deshaun Watson. And then we saw, Patrick Mahomes. And then we saw Houston move up and go get Deshaun Watson. So you saw those teams move up from the 20s into the top 10 and then the early parts of the teens. Big moves to get guys that obviously they believed in, major needs, and aggressive decisions, and they went out and got their guys. So that'll be a big thing to watch.
Now, obviously a big thing that we want to do looking after the first round, what team do you think got the best value?
San Francisco.
Yeah.
Now I was not on high on Solomon Thomas as what Joe was, but factoring in Reuben Foster was a top 5, top 10 player for me, and then Solomon Thomas was right around 30, 31 on my personal draft board. Those values both lined up proportionally to their picks. So I really liked what they did, and they came away with 2 top 30, 35 players for me in my draft class.
Is there another team that really impressed you, Joe?
Yeah, so I like the value that Washington got in John Allen. I thought he was a top 5 player in this class, really a player that they were a beneficiary of some of the other players getting selected ahead of him, pushed him down. I think they've got a pillar piece on their defensive line. And then O.J. Howard to Tampa Bay. I mean, you talk about one of the premier talents in this class, my number 4 overall player in O.J. Howard, who I think has the upside to become one of the best tight ends in the NFL. They got him right there at 19. I thought that was a home run and what they were able to do to help that offense around Jameis Winston.
Now, we hate to do this, but what's a couple of teams where you did not like the value that they got?
Looking over the end result, Cincinnati with John Ross really stands out as a team that medicals were a big question for him. Just felt, again, the entire allure behind Ross for me strikes me as the appeal to speed. And you can get speed elsewhere and get it at a much more friendly economic rate than what a top 10 pick for John Ross would yield you.
I'll go with Miami, Charles Harris. I like a lot of the rushers that were taken after him, even Taco Charlton, TJ Watt. I thought that he's a little bit one-dimensional, and I didn't like the value there, especially with the depth of this class being edge rusher, to reach, in my opinion, for speed. So we had 2 reaches for speed, and the NFL just can't deny their love for speed.
Okay, so we're going to be back tomorrow. What are some things you're going to be looking for tomorrow before we leave today?
I'm looking for who is going to get aggressive here. Last year you saw jostling amongst the top 45.
Yeah.
33 to 45. Would expect to see a continuation of activeness and active trading amongst these teams. players that were first-round values on teams' boards that are still available. Now is a great chance to really put together packages and get on the phone and start making some deals.
And Dalvin Cook, Joe Mixon, the two running backs, is two of the most polarizing figures in the draft. They're available, and Kyle made the point when we were discussing the possibility of Green Bay moving back and not making them the identity of your draft by picking them in the first round. Now we're into the second round, and you see maybe the appetite's a little bit bigger to take a guy like that in that area, and I think those players are going to come off early tomorrow.
All right, that's it. Let's put a bow on this bad boy. We will be back tomorrow, starting with the second round at 4 p.m. Pacific time. So make sure you're tuning in with us. I'm John Owning. This is Kyle Krabs, Joe Marino, signing off. Thanks for joining us.